we should be, in the meantime, we should be good to go.
Edith, Edith, Grunwald, Grunwald.
Your occupation, ma'am?
Well, I was a mom, now I'm retired.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. First of all, let me ask you, how long have you lived in Alaska?
Since May of 1985.
And how long have you lived in the Mat-Su Valley?
Since about April 2005.
And are you married?
Yes.
And who was your husband?
Ben Grunwald.
And how long have you been married to Ben?
This year will be 20 years in December.
And your family, can you tell us what your family consists of?
Well, I have 2 older adopted children. One's autistic and one's not. They're older, and then just here in the immediate Alaska area, and David and a few chickens.
Let me turn your attention, obviously, to David. David was your son, correct?
Yes.
And what was David's birthday?
January 8th, 2000 at 8:08 in the morning. He was the only biological child. We tried to have another one afterwards, but no avail. Just to give him a brother or sister.
And tell us, where did David grow up? In Anchorage, in the Valley?
Well, we started out in Anchorage, and when he was 5, we moved out to the Valley, but before that I was out at Coolest Air National Guard Base, and I put him in a little Spanish Montessori to begin with, and then for kindergarten and to Anchorage Christian School. And then for the first grade, I got Air War College at Maxwell Air Force Base, Alabama, and I took David with me, and he was in Alabama Christian School there, which was a fabulous experience for both of us. And we came back in 2007, and we went back to Anchorage Christian School for the 2nd, 3rd, 4th grades, and that's when we moved out to the Valley, and I homeschooled him for a couple of years, and then he went to Academy Charter for 7th and 8th grade to pretty much get him back acclimated into other students in the school. And then I was trying to get into Mat-Su Career Tech to begin with for the 9th grade. He was number 1 on the non-select list. So he started out at Colony, and he went there for the 9th and 10th grade. He was used to small schools, and Colony is a very large school, very loud, and he had a little bit of a, he didn't like that, so he still wanted to get into Mat-Su Career Tech, and so for the 11th grade he actually got accepted, and so he went from the latter part of August, September, October until November. And it was his absolute goal was to graduate from Mat-Su Career Tech.
And as far as you traveling around, was that because of your job?
My job, I was active duty in the Guard, and I wasn't going to let my career determine when I was going to stop breastfeeding my baby. So, you know, up until 2.5 years, I took him everywhere. Family would meet me places. I would arrange daycare, and even while he was in school, I called it field trips, because I made sure that everywhere we went was educational. We would go do historical things, science things, agricultural things, just to give him a real world experience so he could, I wanted him to grow up to be different, to be a leader, and he was a really smart kid.
And did your husband and other children travel with you?
The first two did a lot in the beginning until they were pretty much engrossed in high school, and the autistic one, had some struggles, and so they needed to. Each kid has their own needs, and since David was so far behind them, and I did everything with them until they got to that point, and so now it was David's turn to do those things.
But I'm saying, like, when you went to different places, was it the whole family?
I would take the other two.
No, I mean, like, when you lived in different places, was it?
I didn't live in different places. Being active duty in the Guard, I've been in Alaska the whole time.
Right, but you, in Anchorage, all of you were...
Well, I was in Fairbanks
Right.
for 12 and a half years. Then I got stationed in Fort Richardson, and then out at Coolest Air National Guard Base, and then back at Fort Richardson. So,
The entire family moved to those areas?
yes.
Right, that's what I was getting at, okay. All right, with David, career tech, what did he want to do when he got out of school?
Well, our first day there, he wanted to get into aviation, and I even posted on Facebook. Looks like we got an aviation career headed. My husband had taken him to a couple of flight trainings, and he did a few landings, and he was all excited. He also liked engineering too, because he was a Lego maniac growing up, and he did Minecraft, and he had in Minecraft you can have businesses and hire all different kinds of people, and so he would build these huge transportation jets, airplanes, shipping. It was just 5 years old. The first Lego was a shark that would move. So he really liked engineering. He built his own super powerful computer, and he was all excited about being in the engineering club, and he came home real quick and got his computer and brought it back because the one at school wasn't strong enough to run their AutoCAD program that they were running. He liked 3D, building 3D pieces and printing them out.
Okay. And when did you retire from the Guard?
It could have been September 15, it could have been September 16, and I only,
Of what year?
2015 or 2016, I think it was 2015, and it's just a little confusing because, and you never forget the date you retire, but this whole thing kind of,
All right. So did you have more time to spend with David?
and that was the whole purpose behind it. I wanted to spend his last 2 years of high school with him to get him ready for college, the military, whatever it was he wanted to do.
And what line of work is your husband in?
He was a professional flight engineer, and so most of his flying, most recent flying was within the state of Alaska, so that he could be home with David too.
And is he still employed?
No, he hasn't been able to fly since this because you have to be able to sleep, and he hasn't been able to sleep. So he's.
So is he technically still employed by them,
They-
by the company, or?
They're an awesome company, and they said at any time he feels that he's ready to come back, he can come back. But I don't know.
Let me ask a little bit about the family structure. I'm going to move that mic. I'm getting a little bit of reverberation.
I can move it.
Maybe just, I think it's just a little bit too close.
Gentleman.
Yeah. Let me get closer to November of 2016. David was living at the house, right?
Yes.
And what area, I don't need the specific address, but what general area do you folks?
We're out behind Gershmel Loop.
And is that the whole time you've been in the valley?
Yes, same house.
Consistently there? All right. I want to talk about what was going on in David's life in the fall of 2016, approaching November of 2016. You already said he was in school, right?
Yes.
Okay. And was he involved in clubs and activities too?
Yes.
And what type of clubs?
The engineering club. He was in the Matsu ski club. He did that for 2 years, and we were getting ready for the third year. And he went to Solid Rock Bible Camp each summer that summer he had accepted Jesus Christ as a Savior, and that was pretty exciting. But where I'm going with this is that Sports Authority was closing down, and so we went in there, and he actually bought his own ski set so that he would have his own skis and outfit, so we wouldn't have to rent. And that night before he left, because he knew he was going to be in school on Monday, he made me promise to go pick up his skis because we just had the bindings put on for Monday. Of course, I didn't meet that promise because Monday we were looking for him. So.
And let me ask about the structure within the family. David was your youngest child, so I assume there was a lot of focus on David by you and your husband.
Focus was on each one of them separately, but for David, he was the youngest, but he was the one in charge because he was very decisive, and if he wanted to do something, he would do it, and if he didn't want to do something, at least growing up, he wouldn't do it. And I've got some pretty solid examples where I had to sit there with him while the rest of the class went hiking on the crevasse, and he wasn't going to do it. So I sat there with him, and no matter what I did to convince him, he was not going to go.
All right, so he had some pretty strong opinions about certain
Very,
things.
very strong opinions, and I'm going to throw this out there. He was a pro-Trump before Trump got voted in, and he voiced his opinions. He was very into politics and finances. He had his own investment and wanted his portfolio for Christmas, and very historical. He would talk with friends about finances and portfolios and investments. He was telling his dad what to invest in and how to invest in. I mean, it was just unnatural.
Well, let me talk
Okay,
a little bit
sorry.
about the other side. But you had some rules as parents in the house.
Extremely, yes.
What type of rules did you
Well,
have?
he had chores,
Okay.
and he had to do his chores, and he had to keep us informed, and he had to do his homework, and I would follow up with there's an online thing with the school where you can check all the assignments, and I kept on that. And
How about curfew?
absolutely a curfew, and
What was this curfew?
for that night the curfew was 9 o'clock.
How about during the week? And we know that was a Sunday. How about
Well,
during
it was dependent upon the situation. It was normally, that was a school night. An extra 20 minutes was no big deal because his goal was to do really well in school, and he didn't want anything to interfere with that, and he knew it was a school night. But he had curfews on everything whenever he needed to pick somebody up, and if I was running late because I know I'm military, but if I'm a couple minutes late, it's no big deal to me.
So was it your opinion that David had a significant level of maturity for his age?
Yes.
And I mentioned in my opening statement that he was taking flying lessons.
Yes.
He had an interest in that. Did he actually take some lessons, and was he actually able to do some flying?
Yeah, he did with his dad. I think I think they only went up one time, though, and did some landings, but it was the following summer. Ben had saved up enough money to let him do the whole thing.
Right. Let me talk about driving in vehicles. There came a time when he was eligible to become a driver in the state of Alaska. And did he get his permit promptly?
Very promptly. Very promptly.
And did you have any concerns about that, or were you totally good with him?
No, I
being a
was
driver?
totally good with it. He was very rule-oriented. I put him in driver's ed. He did all of that. And at the time, with his permit, I had had bilateral surgery on both my wrists, and I couldn't drive. And so I had him actually drive me everywhere. So he was helping his mom, and I was his priority. And we drove all over Anchorage, in some very sticky situations, and so it was an extremely awesome learning experience for him.
Was he a good driver?
He was a very good driver. He would even get on me if I was to do something. Yeah.
And tell us about the Bronco. Who found the Bronco? How was it purchased?
We have had a couple of dear friends that lived in Alaska, and they were moving out, and they had a baby, and the mom had the Bronco and the dad had the truck. I wanted David to buy the truck. It was in better shape. You could only fit 2 people in it, so it was more restrictive. But as soon as he saw that Bronco Eddie Bauer thing, it was cool and cheaper, and I wanted to give him an experience of buying something, negotiating for something, driving something, that whole learning opportunity. And so
When was that vehicle purchased?
it was about August 2016, right? And I think we picked it up September 2016, so he didn't even have it that long.
And did David have to kick in some money, or did he have to put gas in it? What can you tell us about that?
He did. He had to, he had to, like somebody mentioned earlier, in order to teach him life skills, because a lot of kids, being in the military and seeing a lot of people come in, they don't have these skill sets. I opened up a savings account, a little debit card account, so he wouldn't get stuck anywhere, and he could put his money in there and learn how to manage an account with finances. And whenever he got paid for doing his lawn work at different places, he would go deposit it in his account. So yes.
And did David and Ben had to do some work on the Bronco?
They did. They worked on a few things. I'm not exactly sure what all that they worked on, but I know that David looked on Craigslist for a few parts and pieces, and he was all excited. He did all this coordination himself, and before we got the Bronco, he was all over Craigslist looking at all different kinds of vehicles, and I would drive him someplace to look at a vehicle. But, when buying something from somebody you know a little bit more about it. But I would drive him to Anchorage, and we picked up some parts from somebody off of Craigslist, and he would put the new bumper on. And when he was at school one day, I wanted to make sure that tires were good tires because we were going into winter, so I went into Costco and surprised him with 4 brand new tires all around the Bronco, so it would be safer for him to drive.
All right, let me ask you, what did his circle of friends look like in November of 2016?
Well, he had, let me say names.
Yeah.
Gus, Levi.
Oh, can you use both the first and last name if possible?
Gus Schumacher, Levi Schumacher, but they're not related. Victoria's friend Kayla. There was Christian, who would give, when he was at Colony, he drove a little truck, and he and David did some projects together, and I met Christian, and he would drive David home, and I think that's part of that, kids giving each other kids rides. But I knew I'd met Christian, and so whenever David said, I'm with Christian, he's going to give me a ride home, we're going to
And was your house pretty open to all his friends?
Yes, he even brought over a couple other friends that were very nice and friendly, that were happened to live nearby, that we met. Yeah.
You know, you've heard some of the names mentioned in this trial, starting off with the defendant, Erick Almandinger. Was he in the circle of friends, to your knowledge, as far as people you saw frequently?
Eric never came over to our house. None of the other ones.
Did you ever hear Erick Almandinger's name?
I don't remember the name Allmendinger, and at first I didn't even recall the name Eric, and but I think he may have mentioned Eric once or twice before, but I couldn't be sure.
All right. And you don't remember the setting in which it was mentioned or anything?
No.
How about the other? Let me run some other names for you, as to whether they were in the circle of friends in November of 2016. Dominic Johnson. And for this, I'm going to have to ask
No.
you. Okay. Bradley Renfro.
No.
Austin Barrett.
No.
Devin Peterson.
No.
How about David Evans?
No.
Did you know David Evans at all?
No.
And none of those people had ever been to your house?
Correct.
And as far as we talked about David having some responsibility, let me talk about what type of things he would have had in November of 2016. We know he had the Bronco. Did he have his own money or any kind of debit cards or credit cards?
Not a credit card, but a debit card. It could have been doubled up as a credit card, I think, but I don't quite remember. We could double check that, but because a lot of times the debit cards do have a Visa mark on it.
And cell phone?
He had a cell phone.
And how would he usually dress?
Blue jeans, a sweatshirt. He had a couple different pair of shoes. He liked his combat boots. Our neighbor was Army and was his size, and when he left a couple pair for David, so he would tromp around in those.
So just normal clothes
Yeah.
a kid would wear?
Right. He had nice shirts because he had. I still have his clothes. I could even bring them in, but for professional day at Matsu Career Tech, they had to wear a suit and tie and nice dress suit, and so we would work feverishly on making sure he was ready for that. He had nice shoes and socks. He liked shopping for clothes. A little bit unusual for a boy, but he liked going, and we would pick out some nice stuff.
Okay, before we get to November 13th itself, and what happened on November 13th, let me ask you a little bit about Victoria. You know Victoria, obviously.
Yes.
Right? And was she David's girlfriend at the time?
Yes.
And had she been David's girlfriend for a while?
Yes.
Did you and your husband know Victoria's parents?
We met them, talked with them. David liked to ski at Girdwood at Alyeska, and he wanted to go mountain biking at Alyeska because that was a thing during the summer, and so I had told him he should invite him to Victoria, and that could be something you guys could do. So I drove them up there, and that's where a couple of the photos were taken.
I guess where I was going, did you and Ben like Victoria?
Yeah, we liked her a whole lot. We said, David, why do you like Victoria? And he says, are you kidding me? She's the smartest girl. She's no dummy. She is smart. And he just was crazy about how smart she was, and she wanted to be a veterinarian, and she studied, and
All right, before I'm moving to November 13th. I just got 4 photos that I need Mrs. Grunwald to look at. First of all, starting with state's exhibit number 17, which has been admitted as neither. This was David, correct? Photo of David?
Yes.
And do you remember what year, you remember when that photo was taken, the location, that photograph?
Yeah, that was when he started at Matsu Career Tech. That was his school picture in the fall, for starting out.
And let's go to State's exhibit number 18.
And that was before that.
And that's, what is that? That's David and Victoria?
Yes.
Let's go to State's proposed exhibit number 20, please. This is one I used in the opening. Can you tell me what that photo shows?
It was the previous winter skiing up with the Matsu ski and snowboard club.
And number 21, please, proposed.
And that also is David selfie skiing up there.
Right. And as far as the photos, you have a tremendous amount of photos of David, right? And
Most of them are selfies and things that we got from his iPad and things like that.
I would move for the admission of 20 and 21.
Okay. So admitted?
Now, let us turn to November 13th, 2016. We had some testimony from Victoria about what happened on that day. You heard her testify, is your recollection pretty similar to hers?
Yes.
And then just kind of going through it, Victoria mentioned that I think she stayed at your place.
Yeah, she's got her own room there. And David's got his own room, and he would always turn her light off and shut the door and say goodnight. And evidently he forgot to do that, and she knew he would be coming back. And she caught him on video coming in and shutting the light off, saying goodnight. But yeah, she had her own room, and they were separate. They wouldn't even take showers separately together. They were very weird, appropriate like
Okay.
that. Yeah.
All right. And the next morning, everybody woke up. What happened in the morning at your house?
Oh, we got up. Like I said, they didn't even take showers or anything. They just put their clothes on, and we had breakfast, and then we went to church. We liked to bring Victoria with us, and it was good for David and both of them, all of us. And then after church, like she said, we wanted to go goof off, and Ben wanted to go do man stuff. So we left, and we went over and goofed off at the consignment place. David picked out, he was very frugal like his dad, and he picked out, a few different items there for skiing, and a couple of sweatshirts and stuff, and we tried to get Victoria to pick out a few things, but I don't think she was, she didn't feel like she wanted to, and we left there, and it's just kind of fun hitting the furniture stores, and we hit a few of the furniture stores, and it was fun watching them, act like they're playing house, and we plan on getting a couch like this, like that, and David wanted to get a desk, but I wasn't going to buy him a desk that day, but it was a great excuse to go to the furniture stores.
Okay. You made it home eventually?
Made it home, and they studied and did some homework and watched a little bit of TV, and sat on the couch for a while, and I'm there with them, and I didn't know exactly when Victoria needed to be home, and so I said, when does Victoria need to be home, because it was Sunday and tomorrow was school day, and she said, I don't have to be home until a little bit later. I'm like, okay. So it was, after we had dinner, David loved bacon burgers, and Victoria was right there with him. So, David wanted, I just bought a brand new Jeep down in Montana, and David picked it out mostly, and so he wanted to drive it. And I was fine with him driving it because I'm okay with that, but his dad said no, and we have a rule. If one says no, it trumps yes, no matter what. So I said, sorry, you can't drive it today, but there's always another time.
Mhm. So he drove the Bronco.
So he had to drive the Bronco.
So up to that point, was there anything unusual at all
I
that
didn't
would raise
see
concern on your part?
nothing. I had no reason to be concerned about anything.
Right. And
I said what time, we agreed upon, I don't remember if I said what time, he said what time, because we always made sure we had an exact time for him to be home. He was a real stickler about it, his dad was a real stickler about it, and so 9 o'clock, okay. And I said, what are you going to do? Are you going to hang out with Victoria a little bit, what have you? Because I didn't know he was going to have to drive all the way out to the Butte to his dad's house. And so when he called me up a little bit later, I didn't answer the phone. He left me a message, hey, Mom, I got to drive out to the Butte. Can I have a little bit longer? And so I called him right back. And I said, so you got to drive out to the Butte? And he says, yeah. I said, well, okay, no problem. And we hung up, and I thought, this isn't going to work. I need an exact time. So I guess I am a stickler, too. So I called him back, and I said, hey, David, will 9:20 work? Does that give you enough time to do what you need to do? And he goes, yep, that'll be perfect, 9:20.
he didn't argue with you?
Not at all, not at all. 9:20. He was glad to have the extra 20 minutes. So.
No, you are a female, but you know that David was
Mhm.
entering manhood, right? And sometimes young men, get off the line, a little bit. So, did you ever, nowadays, a lot of young people experiment with marijuana. Did you ever smell marijuana on David, or know whether he ever
Nope.
smoked a marijuana joint or anything like that? No.
Nope.
And you have a pretty good sense of smell?
Yes, I had an older brother who did that growing up, and I just stayed away from it because, as you watch somebody older go through something like that, you don't want any part of it.
But
Well,
David didn't tell you that he was going to Erick Almandinger's
Nope.
house, did he?
Nope.
Did you even know where the Allmendingers
Nope.
live, or no?
Nope.
All right. So you wanted 20 more minutes, right?
Yes,
And therefore, you were expecting him home at what time?
9:20 p.m.
And when you say that he was a stickler about it, is it because his parents would not be happy with him if he didn't come home?
He developed that sense of being on time from his dad. I can't take credit for that, but he developed that in the importance of it. So I thought it was a good thing. That way, made it easy.
And before we get into what happened after 9/20, just raising a teenager in the valley, did you feel okay with him being
Absolutely.
out and about,
Absolutely.
driving around?
Driving around because I knew he was responsible. I had no reason to think anything was up.
Now let's get to the more difficult part. 9/20 comes and David's not home, correct? What is going on at your household when he doesn't come?
I tried calling him, no answer. Tried calling him, no answer. Called Victoria to find out what time he dropped her off to figure out where he would be. And she says, yeah, he left a while ago. So I knew something was up. We thought maybe he went off the road somewhere or something. So Ben and I jumped in I think his truck and drove around to see if we could find maybe where he went off the road. We retraced the route we thought he may have taken to see if there's any evidence, and we
To Victoria's father's home?
Yes, yes. Yes, because he would have been coming from, if he dropped Victoria off, then he would have been coming from Victoria's house back home. So we went to that house and we took different ways around, because there's a lot of ravines and a lot of areas, because it had just snowed, it was icy out, and anybody can get into a wreck. And so once we even ran into a trooper when we called the troopers, and he said, well, I'll go look to see if there's any evidence of, a car going off the road or anything. And
And how soon after 9/20? What was the time period between 9/20?
it was about 9:30
So
that
pretty
after I
quick.
made those few calls, and then when we left, yeah.
And then what did you do after that?
Well, I kept on the phone. I had my phone with me. I'm pretty astute as far as looking up information. And once I got, Victoria said, well, he said he might be stopping at Erick's house. I said, well, Erick who? Erick Almandinger. So I looked up Allmendinger, and I found Rodney, and I found the glass business that he has. And so I called the number and I said, hey, have you seen David? And nope, I hadn't seen David. The whole house is sleeping. Okay. Well, I think he stopped over to see Erick. Well, Erick's not here. I don't know where Erick's at. And I said, so you don't know where Erick's at? He says, no, I hadn't seen him for a couple hours. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, uh-oh, Erick's missing too. Thinking he's a concerned father as well. So I'm like, oh, crap. So by this time, we were already driving around the Allmendinger house, and we were right there when I got him on the phone, so we didn't bother to go knock on the door to try to find anything out. So I said, well, I guess we'll just keep driving around and try to find where David might be.
And was there, what was the level of concern at that point?
Well, I was getting really concerned by this point because I couldn't find his Bronco. We couldn't find any evidence of him getting into a wreck. And then when I heard that maybe he was having some problems with his radiator, I thought, well, maybe he broke down on the side of the road, or maybe somebody stole his vehicle and he was in it, or maybe somebody stole it and they tossed him out. I didn't know at that point. Maybe somebody kidnapped him. So this is what was running through my mind at that point, just as a
And when was the
mom.
first time that you contacted the troopers?
Right after that, we got home. I called the troopers, and I think Ben stopped over. We stopped over at the troopers too and told them. And then when I got home, and so I called Rodney Allmendinger back up, and I said, hey, I just want to let you know that, because it's been a few hours now, and David's always here on time. I said, I think something's wrong, and so I called the troopers, and I thought he would be glad, because, as a concerned parent, if your son's missing too, let's find him. But his response wasn't quite that I expected. He's, excuse the language here, but he goes, these kids are fucked. I said, okay. I don't know what that means, but this doesn't sound good.
And
he
you
goes,
did not have contact with Rodney Allmendinger before November 13th?
No.
No.
No. And then I said, well, is there anybody else I can call? He gave me any other phone numbers I can call to try to find David. And he goes, yeah, I do have one person's number and name, and I'll give it to you. And he goes, but don't tell him you got it from me. Okay. I wasn't under oath or made a promise or anything. And he goes, his name is Devin Peterson, and he gave me his phone number. And I said, okay. So I called up that phone number, and I said, is this Devin? Yeah. I said, well, this is David's mom. I'm looking for David. Do you know where David's at? Have you seen him? And he said, nope. I said, okay, thank you.
That's all.
That's it.
In contact with any other people during the course of that evening and morning?
As I was going along, you get on Facebook and you can see who's friends with friends, and If you're not somebody's friends, depending on their privacy level, you can either A, see their stuff, or B, not see their stuff. But if other people are friends with them, they can see their stuff. And I went into the family portion because I got the name of David Evans, and I looked at David Evans' stuff, found his mom, I called his mom, Piercy Evans, and she said that she hadn't seen David Evans, because I wanted to know how David Evans fit into all of this, since he was the one that had been, needed a ride that afternoon.
So you see the calendar next to you there in exhibit form, and the highlighted dates are dates that are very significant in your life, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the jury has already heard that David's body was found on the afternoon of December 2nd, 2016, and we heard your testimony about the fact that he didn't come home on November 13th, 2016, when he was supposed to. How would you describe those days in between those 2 days?
Sleepless, terrorizing, scared. We met with troopers. I mean, at first they didn't seem like it was any big deal, and that's when we got, we went through, I think, 3 different people assigned to the case. One had to leave on a vacation or something. And that's when we got this trooper, and he came in, and I just instantly felt like we had somebody on the case that was going to take it and run with it. And so he asked us all kinds of questions. We had at one point, somebody must have called in and said David was home. They bust in our house in the middle of the night and said David was home. And I mean, we were all already freaked out. And so we told the trooper the next day what happened. And he goes, I didn't know anything about it. And that kind of upset everybody at that point. And he would give us a few reports on how the investigation was going. It didn't really sound like anything. I mean, he was being hopeful at the same time as probably being considerate of us. But
And you folks hired your
we did. We hired a
investigator
private
too?
investigator to help us too, to go out and help us look. And they arranged a few searches, and they had community members out on their own, and people,
And
you know,
who was
looking.
that? Who was the private investigator?
Donna Anthony with Alaska Investigation Agency.
And does she have prior police experience?
Yes, she's a retired Palmer police officer, and she had some people up here from missing people investigations where they would actually search out, and so they had, I don't remember what they called the man, but he was a tracker. And so he went out to try to track. I mean, we looked everywhere we all split up. Ben went someplace. Friends, John took his drone out and looked all up and down the river for it. I went out in remote areas looking for it. My sister was searching with me. I went out by myself whenever she had to leave. Ben would go out. Other friends would come out. Individuals, people we didn't even know would come out and search on their own because everybody had different ideas. We had people with dogs, people with horses, airplanes, even a helicopter. It just didn't make any sense.
And is it fair to say that there were some efforts being made most every day during that
Every
interim?
single day. We had group meetings at our house. It was like command posts. We had things like this, maps where people would go and not go. People would report back on where they went. Donna Anthony was following up on different leads. They had a hotline that people would call in, and she would follow up. People all over Facebook would contact me, contact whoever, and give us anything and everything that they might know to try to help out.
All right, and do you remember Sergeant Wigson contacting you on Friday, December 2nd? after David? After?
Yeah, but before we get to that date, I think it was the day before, and maybe the day before that, where he asked me to get David's dental records. And then he came by and wanted DNA samples from us. So I know he tried to kind of keep it light a little bit, but at that point, we knew that this wasn't going to end well.
And did you provide, is that when you provided David's toothbrush to?
I didn't give him a did I give you a toothbrush?
You
Okay.
did.
I gave him a toothbrush, I guess.
For DNA sample?
Yeah, but they wanted ours too, and
Okay.
the dentist was amazing. He sent everything.
So are you saying it was before December 2nd that?
Yeah, it
Reality
was just a
started-
couple of days before that. So Ben and I didn't know, but we thought something was getting close.
And then December 2nd, Sergeant Wigson came to you. and-
It was 3-ish, 4-ish, maybe up to 4-ish. I had the TV on watching something goofy. And that's when he told us that they had David.
And then after December 2nd, eventually the family took custody of David's body for funeral purposes, right?
I think it was a couple of weeks, because they had to do all the stuff that they had to do with the medical examiner and all that stuff, so
And when did David's funeral occur?
I couldn't tell you right now. The date's eluding me.
And where is David buried?
He's buried at Fort Richardson National Cemetery. Both Ben and I are retired, and so we have benefits there. And so we both have a grave site, so whoever dies next goes in with David, and then the next person will be, and there's a reserve site right next to him, and that would be the third person.
And as far as the Connect River scene that Investigator Adams talked about today, have you been to that location?
I absolutely did. As soon as I found out that was, Ben wouldn't go out there. I had to go out there. I think my sister may have been with me, and I drove out there. And you want to talk about homes? I never saw a home off the road. It looked like I was going out in the middle of nowhere. So if there's homes out there, you can't really see them from the road.
And is there any type of marker or remembrance?
Yeah, what we did is I wanted to mark the spot, and I contracted with a welder friend who is also an artist. And originally, artists have this thing of their own that they like to just create, and you just go with it. Okay.
I'm just gonna check on relevant crimes.
Well, this is my last
I'll let
question.
him finish this answer and then that's probably good.
Yes, we have a marker, and it has David's dates, and it's in the spot where David was found.
And how old was David when he was killed on November 13th?
David was 16. He would have turned 17 on January 8th. So November, December, so he had a couple more months to go.
Thank you.
I have no questions.
Okay, you can step down, ma'am. We will go ahead and recess for our morning recess, come back in 15 minutes. Off record.
Did you do that? Oh, no, look at that. Look how fancy.
Can't have cords all loose and whatnot. This ain't done. We got a couple of those
I know, that's pretty cool. 11:15. It might be 1:15. He was one of the. I don't know that I remember. Yeah.
Okay, we're back on record. We ready for the jury?
Yeah, just before the jury comes out, a little bit less of the non-relevant and hearsay stuff with the next witness. I'm in an awkward position where objecting is drawing attention to it, and not objecting is leading to some things a little bit beyond the scope of what's relevant coming in.
Just the response to that would be, I hope we don't forget during a murder trial that we're talking about the death of a human being versus just putting a photo up and the jury relying on the photograph to represent the human being. So I mean, I think it is a balance. I don't think we've abused the balance at this point. We've laid some background, but we have not. I mean, I can go on for 2 hours probably talking about David Grunwald's life, but we're trying to strike a balance.
Well, what I'll say is the following. It does put the defense in an awkward situation to object to anything coming in. And so I would just ask you to keep it at a minimum. I mean, lay the foundation for the stuff that you need to get into for that night, but the impact of it is not really relevant for this proceeding.
I didn't ask Mrs. Grunwald.
No, you didn't, so I want to make sure that doesn't come in. But I do think we've already probably heard a lot about the young man and his lifestyle and so forth, so I don't think we have to repeat all of that.
No.
That would just be cumulative, okay? All right. Okay, please be seated, everybody. So, Mr. Kalachek, you can continue with your next witness.
Benjamin Grunwald.
All right, come on up, sir.
from testimony you give in this case now before this court. You can feel all free. Will you state and spell your first and last name for the record?
Benjamin J. Grunwald, Benjamin, Grunwald.
And your occupation.
I'm a professional flight engineer.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
Let me ask you, when it came to raising your son David, was there a division of duties in the household between you and your wife? Or did both of you participate in pretty much everything?
A division, and both of us participated.
All right. And what kind of things do you figure that you had more to do with when it came to David's upbringing?
Well, I taught him how to be independent, how to do his own laundry. You know, you have chores and you need to do them. This is what something, as a young man, you take responsibility for. You take out the trash every day. You feed the chickens every day. You mow the lawn once a week, and you give me a bill for your labor so I can pay you. And once a week, I expect you to clean your bedroom and your bathroom. This is something that wasn't negotiable. He had to do these things.
And was he, for the most part, okay with doing those things?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm going to focus on November of 2016. We know David had a Bronco, right?
Correct.
Did you have anything to do with purchasing that Bronco, or tell us, how did that come about?
We had friends that were leaving the state. They had two vehicles. One was a truck, one was the Bronco. David couldn't drive the 4-speed in the truck. He had problems with that, so he purchased the Bronco. It was a great price and needed some work, and we were going to work on it together, and which we did.
We know Ford stopped making the Bronco a while ago, right?
Correct. This was a full-size 95 Eddie Bauer.
So it was not the latest and the greatest in
No.
terms of vehicles. Did it have some issues?
Yes,
Or
it needed an EGR valve. The transmission was leaking. It needed a mass airflow sensor. David went out and purchased the computer that plugs into it for that year vehicle, and found out that it did need the EGR valve, and he replaced it. He needed the mass airflow sensor, and he replaced that. We found a loose line on the transmission. It needed some Teflon tape, and we fixed that. And there were some other little things that I wouldn't let him do. The radius arm bushings were shot, and that means getting under the truck, dropping part of the suspension, and he didn't have the experience to do that. Since I'm an A&P, aircraft and power plant mechanic, I do have the experience to be able to fix something at that level.
did he help you with those things?
Yes.
So let me ask, on one end, we have the brand-new car coming off the assembly line. The other end, we have the beater with the heater, as they call it,
Correct.
in Alaska. Where would you put this Bronco in that?
A little
that
above the
spectrum?
beater with a heater. It needed some work, but it was something that he could learn and have experience on, and have some life lessons.
And so did you feel it was reliable enough for him to get from point A to point B within in the valley?
Yes.
And-
My wife surprised him with a new set of tires on it, and it took him, I think, 2 days to realize that the old tires weren't there. So it was kind of a funny situation.
And of course, the Bronco's a full size, so kind of had some metal around the occupants. Okay. Let me ask you about. Let me stay on the Bronco. I mean, was it a flashy vehicle, something that would
No.
get people's attention, or something that people would want to
No, it
steal?
had the prior owner had put a Alaska Girls Kick Ass sticker on the back, and I told David, after we get this fixed up, you can put a for sale sign in it, classic 95 Bronco, and leave that sticker in the back, and somebody at school will have to have it.
Yeah,
So,
all right. Got it. And let me ask you, like, David's MO, like, what he would wear and what would he usually have on his person, and specifically referring to November of 2016, for example. All of us carry certain things. Did David carry a wallet usually?
he had a wallet, watch, his phone.
Anything else?
I think he might have had a penknife on him and his pen, his writing pen.
And did he usually wear the same type of clothes, like day in, day out, except for church or maybe special occasions? Did he?
Correct.
What was his usual outfit?
Nothing sloppy, nothing with stains, because again, I'm not raising a hoodlum. And he, was comfortable in a hoodie. He loved his, he wore his slippers about the house, and nothing unusual.
And as far as, so nothing flashy about his clothes, or how much money would he usually carry in November of 2016?
Well, as my wife stated, he had his debit card. He might have $20 cash on him. If he needed something to get some snacks, food, something to eat.
And you may know, what I'm getting at is, was there anything about David, the way he dressed or the vehicle he drove, that was flashier, that would make him attractive as a victim of a crime?
Not that I would be aware of, no. Not that I would have that thought process, no.
And we asked others about the curfew. Would you agree that he was pretty good about making his curfew?
Yeah, and I want to elaborate on that just a little bit so people understand why I was so hard on him about that. I spent 21 years as an Air Force flight engineer, and one of my bosses is sitting out there in the audience, one of the captains I used to fly with. And when the Army needs something on the ground and they say they need it at 9 o'clock, they don't mean 9:01, that we have to make an airdrop. And if my boss tells me to show up at 8 o'clock, that means 7:55 or I'm late. So I imparted this to David, that time has meaning, and when you tell somebody that you're going to be somewhere at a certain time, do it.
And you were David's age some time ago, right?
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. And you probably have friends and you observe different maturity levels.
Correct.
Did you think your son was pretty mature for his age?
yes.
We know he was 16. Was he pretty mature?
Correct. Just about turned 17, and he was doing real well.
And in terms of his maturity, structure or plans for the future, did he have those things?
Well, he was the only 16-year-old that I know of for that Christmas that he wanted me to call Fidelity and open let him have his own portfolio. And I checked on it, and they said, no, you got to be 18. And he got all upset at that and thought that was, of course, his vernacular would be stupid. Because he wanted me to buy some stuff. And
So he did the chores. Did he do, aside from the chores, did he do work for the other neighbors in the area,
Yes.
or other people?
yes, he did. One of the other captains that I used to fly with needed his lawn serviced, once, twice a week, and he'd go over there and do that. And I'd drive him over because we had the lawnmower in the back of the truck, and he'd go over there and take care of that and get paid and put the money in his savings.
All right. And, on the flip side of the coin, taking the structure and the curfews aside, David got some privileges too, right? I mean, he, obviously, you loved your son, right?
Correct.
He participated in skiing.
Correct.
We heard about, he took flight lessons.
Correct. He was always interested in what I did because of, we'd be watching, for instance, a James Bond movie, and some of the James Bond movies are filmed in Hong Kong. And I would tell David, well, I've walked right down that street and I've eaten at that restaurant. Really? Oh, I'd like to do that. So, he would ask some of the captains that would come over to visit the house, how do I do or become what you are? And they would tell him, this is the steps that you need to take. So I, one day said, well, I'd like to get a model airplane. So we got a little electric-driven RC aircraft. And of course, the first time he flew it, it went 6 feet, and into the ground it went. But the second time, it was 8 feet. The next time, it was 12. And then after that, it was up in the air doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And then I surprised him with his first flight lesson the summer before his brutal murder. And we went to Palmer, and the excuse was to go out to the Palmer Airport, and I had to go get a tool from one of the mechanics. He had no idea. So we went out there, got him in a Cessna 172 wet with an instructor. They went up and did an hour and a half of air work. They did 9 touch and goes, and after I asked the instructor how he did, and he says, well, I was pretty impressed. The last 2 touch and goes, I was totally off the controls. He did it by himself. And I had saved up enough money for last summer. I had saved up enough money for last summer so my son could go get his flight lessons knocked out.
Come on.
Do you remember December 2nd, 2016?
Yes, like it happened yesterday.
And do you remember Sergeant Wegson coming to your house?
Yes. And would you like me to tell you exactly how that happened?
If you would.
Yes. Got a call from the trooper.
Okay, so take your time. And if you ever need a recess, we can take it.
Got a call from the trooper at 3:44. Because I asked him as a personal favor to call me before he came over to the house. On December 2nd, 2016, he arrived at 4:02, had told us that David had been kidnapped and murdered and tortured.
Thank you. Our next witness is Trooper Chris Green.
Who's gonna take? Out in the hallway.
We had him ballpark for 11:15, so
Okay,
he might not be for that.
Here, Trooper Green.
okay. Come on up, sir. Miss Howard, this is your witness?
Yes.
Okay.
If you remain standing, slowly raise your right hand. Solemnly swear and or affirm that the testimony you give in this case now before this court is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Sir, will you state and spell your first and last name for the record?
It's Christopher Green, CHRISTOPHER, GREEN,
And your occupation.
Alaska State Trooper.
Thank you so much.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Trooper Green, how long have you been with the Alaska State Troopers?
For 10 years,
And what is your current assignment?
patrol.
How long have you been doing that?
I've been doing that for 6 years. I had an absence of military leave for about 4 years.
Do you have a particular shift that you work on patrol?
I do day shift.
Have you always had the day shift or?
Correct.
Okay. What is the day shift generally?
Day shift is at this time from 6 in the morning till 6 p.m.
Can you describe to the jury what the general duties of a patrol officer are, as opposed to, say, we've heard from some investigators in the case?
Okay. Basically, the patrol officer responds to initial calls for the domestic violences, missing persons, thefts, burglaries, along with doing traffic stops, traffic enforcement, speed enforcement, those kind of type of duties during the day shift hours.
Are the patrol officers generally first officers to respond to let's say, a 911 call or?
That is correct.
Okay. So I'm going to draw your attention to November 13th of 2016. How did you become involved with the disappearance and the investigation into David Grunwald?
When I came on shift on the day after, on 11/14, at about 0600 hours, Trooper Steen had initially received the call and was passed on to me for day shift for follow-up.
When you say the call, what call are you referring to?
The call that the missing person, the David Grunwald.
Do you know about when that call came in?
If I recall, it's somewhere around, I'd say about 11 p.m., 11 or 12, somewhere around there.
And would it help refresh your recollection to review your report?
Correct, it would.
You may.
You just review the first part and then we'll look up when you're done.
Okay.
Okay. Does that help?
It does.
Remember, when did that call come in?
So that call came in at 11:35. Well, I didn't see the last part. I think it was 11:38 or 11:35.
11:50.
11:50, okay, sorry.
And that was on November 13th?
That is correct.
And so Trooper Steen is assigned as the initial,
Correct. It was dispatched to him from dispatch initially.
and that was on the 13th.
Correct.
And then you come on shift the 14th, and then that's how you become.
That's correct.
And so what do you do first when you're made aware of the investigation in your?
Well, first I made contact with the initial officer, Trooper Steen, gathered the information that he had received, and then after that I made contact with the family members.
And do you recall who specifically you contacted?
I believe it was Edith Grunwald.
Did you also have any contact with Victoria McKelvey?
Correct, I did.
And what, if anything, did you do based on your conversations with Edie and or Victoria?
With Edie, I'd gotten more information as if she'd heard from anyone else that she had contact with. Later on the day, she advised me that she'd had contact with a couple of known associates with her son David, and so I was attempting to follow up on those. Also contacted the girlfriend, Victoria, and she advised me that after he had dropped her off, that she didn't know where, at that point, where he was going to be going after that.
Did you speak to Rodney Allmendinger?
Correct, I did.
And what was the purpose of speaking to Rodney?
Came knowledge to me that Mr. Allmendinger's son was to be taken into Anchorage by David Grunwald. And so I was making contact with Rodney to make sure to get in contact with his son to ask him some questions in regards to that.
Okay. And his son, are you referring to Erick Almandinger?
That is correct.
When you contacted Rodney, was that by phone?
It was.
Were you able to speak to Erick at that time?
I was not. Rodney advised me that he doesn't have a cell phone at the time, and the only way he gets in contact with him was through Facebook Messenger.
And was that on November 14th?
That's correct.
Did Rodney give you any other suggestions as far as how to get a hold of Erick at that time?
He did not to my knowledge.
And so what do you do next in your investigation?
Next one, investigation. After I got the information, I had gotten information for a friend that was supposed to know David Grunwald was a David Evans. I attempted to make contact with David Evans. I believe I contacted his mother, and mother said that they had had dinner with her two sons, David and Christopher, the night before, and that Christopher had driven David and dropped him off somewhere, but the location was in an area, but not quite certain what house he might have went to in that area.
And you're talking about David Evans?
That's correct, David Evans. Was not able to locate David Evans at that point.
What about the Bronco? At this point, are you aware that the Bronco is also missing? Are you also looking for the?
I was. I went to the area where I was informed that David Evans would have been dropped off at, so I patrolled the neighborhood looking for the 1995 Bronco, blue Bronco. Without success, I could not find it there. I went over to the area of Allmendinger's residence to look for the vehicle, and it was not there as well. And then later on during the day, dispatch was notified of a burned out vehicle up on Solitude, about a half mile up towards Baldy Mountain.
Okay. And that was is that November 14th still?
That is correct.
Has ABI gotten into the investigation?
Not at that point.
Yet,
They had
okay.
not.
Do you recall about what time the dispatch came in with regard to the Bronco?
I know it was in the afternoon, but I don't remember the specific time.
And you said that was up off on Solitude Street?
Correct.
Oh, go ahead.
Solitude is the name of the street, but it doesn't really go very far. It actually it hits a trail and it accesses the Mount Baldy there. It's a common trail. A lot of people go up ATVs in that area.
So it's not, it's not a road?
It's not a road per se. Yeah.
How do you get up to Solitude Street?
You take, I have to remember the Sites. You take Sites Road to Solitude from Chirac.
Are there any other ways to get up there?
Not to my knowledge. Sites Road is the primary route to get there.
What about as far as getting to Schrock?
Getting to Chirac, you would have to, you can take a few directions or a few avenues from there. You can take Lucille, or you can take it to Chirac from Selden.
Are you familiar with the bridge that crosses over the Little Sioux?
I am.
Okay. About how far was that bridge from the location of the Bronco?
I'm not certain of the exact distance, but if I were to guess, I would say it would probably be about a mile from the bridge.
Walkable?
Yes.
When you got up to the Bronco scene, were you the first responder, or were there other troopers there?
That is correct. I was the first responder. Shortly behind me was another trooper.
And who was that?
Sergeant Jacob Covey.
And so what do you do when you get to the scene?
When I got to the scene, the plate was still on it, on the vehicle, so I made sure that the plate matched the vehicle that was reported that David Grunwald was in. Verified that that was in fact the plate. The vehicle, make and model, in its burned out state, resembled a Ford Bronco. After that, myself and Sergeant Covey did a search of the area to see if we can locate anyone or anything in the area. It was negative results with that. After that, then we made contact with ABI to come out and process the scene.
And what was the purpose of contacting ABI at that point?
At this point, we felt that there's a suspicion of foul play, possibly.
Do you know about how far you walked up the ATV trail to get to the Bronco?
I estimated about a half mile from Solitude Road and Sites Road.
Did you take any photos of the area?
I did.
Judge, I want to approach the witness with state's proposed exhibits 130 through 130, 131, 132, 133, 134, 135, and 136.
Okay, and are those also going to be coming up on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. You may.
I'm going to show you what I've been marked as State's Exhibit 130. Do you recognize that
I
photo?
do.
What is in that photo?
A photo of the burned out vehicle up on Body Mountain.
Are there any, in that location, are there any residences, buildings? Can you kind of explain the area a little bit?
No, this area doesn't have any residents on. If the residents, if any, would be at the beginning of the Solitude Road where Solitude tees into Sites Road. There's a residence there on the left. As far as going up further up the trail, to my knowledge, there's no other residences in that area.
And State's Exhibit 131? What is in that photo?
Another photo of another angle of the burned Ford Bronco.
And 132?
Another angle of the Ford Bronco.
And 133?
Front view of the Ford Bronco.
And 134?
Rear view of the Ford Bronco with the license plate Juliet Foxtrot Mike 910.
And that license plate did in fact match the license plate from the
Correct.
missing Ford Bronco? 135?
Interior portion of the Ford Bronco.
And 136?
And this will be the rear portion of the cab of the Ford Bronco.
Move to admit 130 through 136.
Objection.
So admitted.
When you initially got to this scene and you started taking pictures of the Bronco, did you note anything of any significance as far as the path that the Bronco traveled, or can you
We try to
kind of
determine
describe
the
that?
path, I mean, in the direction that it was heading, which was more of a northernly route. There obviously were other tracks in the area from previous vehicles and ATVs. The person who notified us about the vehicle to begin with was in the area and said that he had reported seeing some other activity there. I believe it was the night before, but not necessarily related to this. So.
You said earlier that you contacted ABI because at that point, you suspected foul play.
Correct.
Can you tell me why at that point did you suspect foul play?
It's very unusual to find a burned out vehicle, given the circumstances, that David Grunwald was missing, his last known whereabouts, based on the information I received from his family that he's typically on time every time. It's just very unusual for him not to be at home when he's supposed to be at home. Really didn't have any reason to doubt that he would have been any other place. And when this vehicle was so far from the location where he had dropped his girlfriend off, which I believe she lived in the Butte area, and the location was totally on the opposite side of Wasilla, and finding the vehicle was burned, and kind of raised suspicion to me that there's a little bit more going on than him just being gone, missing for a while.
From your just looking and being around the Bronco initially, could you tell anything regarding the recency of the fire from the Bronco?
You could smell it was fresh. It was a fresh burn vehicle. It wasn't anything that's been sitting out there for a while. With any fire, you can tell if it's been, it's been lit recently. You can smell odors. You can smell the plastic that's melted. You can smell the rubber that rubber smell that's burned from the tires. So it was definitely recent, as opposed to being out there for a while. Otherwise, depending on weather and conditions and things like that, if it had rained, you would have seen, water washing the ashes down, maybe the ditches or things of that nature.
What about to the touch? Did you touch the Bronco at all?
I did. It was cold to the touch at that point.
Did you do anything regarding AT&T records with respect to David's phone?
I did.
What did tell the jury about that?
So with David's phone, and I got his phone number, we did what we call an emergency ping on his phone to see if we can't locate where his cell phone was at. The AT&T records came back. The last known area, if I recall, was somewhere between Palmasilla Highway and Trunk Road, but it had like a 5,000 mile, I believe a 5,000 mile radius, but a 5,000 meter radius. And so it wasn't able to really locate or be able to, hone in on where his cell phone actually was at that last known point. It's just basically a general area, which is, I think, about 5 miles, which is quite a big area.
So nothing about that led one way or another?
It did not. It just gave us an idea of the last time his cell phone hit the cell phone tower.
And we'll get into that with some other witnesses, but do you recall what time that was? Just off.
I do not.
Okay. After you contacted API and they kind of took over, did you have any other role in the investigation?
I kind of helped out where I could throughout the case. If they needed assistance with search and rescue teams or something like that, having a liaison type person, I took that role up a couple of times. And then towards the end of the case, I was actually on duty working overtime whenever they located David.
On December 2nd?
That's correct.
Okay, 1 second, Judge. That's all I have. Thank you.
Cross-examination?
So you also had conversations with Edith Grunwald, right?
That's correct.
And you instructed her to contact AT&T.
Yes.
And the reason that you instructed her to and specifically instructed her to contact AT&T to find out if David had gotten any calls or texts or who last used his phone.
Correct.
And Mrs. Grunwald provided you with a telephone number.
Yes, to my knowledge, she did this.
Okay, and I don't expect you to memorize the telephone number, so if you want to look at your report, it's okay, page 2 of your report.
I don't have a copy of that.
Oh, okay. 907-521-6743. Does that sound like the number? Do you want me to approach?
Yeah, if you show it to me.
Approach witness?
I haven't put them
This one? Okay.
Okay, I'm just showing you a copy of your report.
Okay. Phone number. Correct. 907-521-6743.
Okay, and you found out who the person that phone number was
Yes.
associated with?
Yes.
And who was that person?
Calvin Hosner.
Thank you, I have no other questions.
Can you redirect? Step down, sir.
Thank you.
Your name, standing, please. You solemnly swear and or affirm that the testimony you give in this case now and before this court speaks the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
Please be seated. Will you please state your spelling, first and last name for the record?
Andrew Thomas Ballesteros, first name is Amdrew, last name is Ballesteros.
Where's your occupation, sir?
Alaska State Trooper, investigator.
Go ahead, Ms. Hunt.
Thank you. Investigator Ballesteros, how long have you been with the Alaska State Troopers?
Coming up to 15 years now.
And how long have you been an investigator?
I've been an investigator for a little over 2 years now.
And do you currently work out of the Valley?
Yes, I do.
How long have you been in the Valley?
Going on about 6 years now.
Before you were an investigator with the troopers, what was your assignment?
I worked patrol out here in the valley. I was on the criminal suppression unit.
How long did you do that for?
Approximately 2 years.
And what about before that?
I was on patrol out here in Palmer.
I'm going to draw your attention to November of 2016. How did you become involved with this case?
On November 15th, 2016, I was advised by investigator Colt that there was an investigation to a missing teenager that had disappeared on the 13th of November. At that point, with minimal information, we learned that there was a Bronco that involved David Grunwald that was found burned out off of Baldy Mountain off Sites Road. To assist in the investigation, we responded to the area. Knowing the area itself, I felt that it was necessary to see if we could possibly locate any surveillance footage that could lead to the vehicle either coming and going from the area. So I responded to the Valley Country Store, which is off of Selden and Church.
I'm just going to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
How far away is the Valley Country Store from the location of the Bronco?
At least a couple miles.
So at this point, you're just looking for some video, if any, on any stores or gas stations have
Correct. And
lead you somewhere.
right, in investigations like this, it's imperative that if there is anything out there, you want to get to it as soon as possible because several surveillance systems either loop or they go over or they don't have one at all on recording.
I want to back up just a little bit to so you went to the Bronco scene as well?
On the 15th, yes.
On the 15th, okay. And who was there when you arrived?
On scene was, I believe it was 2 fire investigators who were still on scene processing the scene.
And did you do anything at the scene?
We did kind of a canvass of the area, the outer portion of it, made our own observations of the Bronco being obviously burned, and just kind of canvassed the area.
And what were you looking for? Anything specific? Or?
Anything that could lead, anything I guess that would be relevant items could come from a vehicle or a clothing or anything that would be relevant to the case and the missing person.
Did you find anything?
No.
Okay, now I'll come back to the Valley Country Store. So now you're looking for video from the Valley Country Store.
Yes, it was myself and investigator called. We contacted one of the workers there. We advised the time frame that we were kind of looking for the 13th and 14th, and we requested the footage from the manager at that point.
And did you receive the footage?
I did. I received the footage on, let me back up for a second. in being in contact with the manager, I also requested additional footage. I think it was a different timeline on the 19th, I believe it was. I received the footage on the 21st and reviewed it on the 21st, basically on at that point.
Upon your review of the surveillance footage from the Valley Country Store, was there anything significant as far as that you might have taken up next?
Yes, on the 22nd, when I was reviewing the footage, in looking at, it would be the morning of the 14th, according to the video footage, I believe it was around 12:55 a.m. I'm looking obviously for the Bronco or David Grunwald or anybody that would be linked to the Bronco through the footage. There's several different angles. You see in store, you see at the gas pumps, and then you see the intersection of Church Road and Selden Road. So it's got a wide view also of the area. At 12:55 is when I noticed a cab, what appeared to be an Alaska cab. Just from being on patrol, I kind of know what they look like. Traveling northbound on Church Road and it passed Selden, continuing north, which would be in the direction that you would go if you were heading up to where the Bronco was burned off of Sites Road. Could be a possible direction you would go. I just made a little note of that just to see, just as an interesting point. At about, I think it was 1:03, I saw the cab actually, what appeared to be the same cab coming southbound on Church Road. So basically the cab going up at 12:55, the cab coming back at 1:03, so about 8 minutes later. And I just kind of noted that and thought it was interesting because that's about the time it would take you from that location to driving there, heading up on to Sites Road, or there's also the Little Sioux Bridge and stuff up there or near the trailhead. It's about the time it would take you to go up there and then drive back.
Where is we talked just a little bit with another witness about the Little Sioux Bridge.
Mhm.
Where is that in relation to the Valley Country Store?
So yeah, that's about 2 miles out, I would say. So basically, you're going to come up from the intersection of Selden and Church. You continue up Church, and then you take a left-hand turn on the Schrock. Schrock bends around and it brings you to the Little Sioux Bridge. And then if you cross the bridge there, you continue on to Sites Road, which shows the trailhead, and then ultimately where Mr. Grunwald's Bronco was burned at. In knowing that information, just on, if you will, a hunch, I had an investigator call in the office with me. I said, hey, come take a look at this. I said, I think we should call the cab company and see if there's anybody that was picked up either for service or dropped off, just to cover our basis, and maybe there's something there. So at that point, I told the investigator to call the Alaska Cab Company, which he did. They advised at approximately 1 a.m. there was a pickup at the Little Sioux Bridge, and we got the information for the cab driver who did drive up there and make the pickup.
And who was that?
That was Mr. McCormick.
Did Mr. McCormick also provide a cell phone number for the pickup?
Yes, we went, we actually, myself and an investigator we called him on speakerphone and we interviewed him over the phone. He advised that, he gave us the phone number of who had made the call for the pickup at the Little Sioux Bridge, and I think it was 907-521-4273 was the phone number that he provided.
And what did you do based on that information?
Based off that information, and in the interview, we learned information that was relevant from Mr. McCormick. That and I was in a direct interview with him, so he basically advised that he went and picked up 3 teens that were in their later teens at the Little Sioux Bridge, and they had $43 on them. They asked how far $43 would get them, including to Palmer, and he dropped them somewhere off near Trunk Road and PWH, I think it was.
So at this point, you have a phone number, and then you potentially have 3 teams that you want to investigate further.
Yes, and the other information he said was they appeared to be not dressed for the weather and cold, and it just made sense to me that it could still, that could be potentially involved and very important.
And so what did you do next? At
that point, me and investigator Colt made a plan to do a search warrant. He went ahead and applied for a search warrant, which is called a ping warrant, for that phone number, the 521 number I provided. Based off of that, he was applied for and was granted a search warrant for the number. What it does is the ping warrant gets you live. When you say it's live, it means it gives you the location of that phone being used. It either hits on cell towers or it can give you exact locations of where that phone's being used at. So that was on the 22nd. On the 24th, we were already up on the phone watching the locations, waiting for it to be used. It was Thanksgiving. It was about 10 p.m. at night. Investigator called me and said, hey, the phone looks like it's pinging down at near Cars and Wasilla at the grocery store. So we both went down to the grocery store on Thanksgiving. It being Thanksgiving, there wasn't very many people there. We kind of looked around the area, see if anybody was using their cell phone. Didn't notice anybody outside the store. We went inside the store. We came around the corner to the deli area where people kind of sit and a lot of times play on their phones. There was one individual that was on his cell phone. He was in his later teens. He appeared to be in his later teens. We watched him for several minutes. The whole time the phone stayed right there as far as our pings and what we were seeing from our search warrant. It was showing the phone was still there, and we're watching the individual. At some point, the individual looked like he's getting ready to head out of the store, and it was necessary to make contact with him. He started to head outside the main entrance of Cars there, and we requested a patrol unit, which I believe was Trooper Somerville, to respond to the area. And he met with the individual we'd been following that was on the cell phone just outside of the main entrance. He contacted him. Trooper, go ahead.
I was gonna, who ultimately was the individual in the Cars with the cell phone?
Dominic Johnson was identified as the person that we were watching that was on the cell phone and provided the phone number of 521-4273, which is the phone that we were up on, to Trooper Somerville, confirming that that was the right person we were looking for.
And can you just describe what Dominic Johnson looked like on that night?
He was tall. He's kind of a bigger kid. He was on his cell phone. Nobody was with him. He looked like he didn't. On Thanksgiving, it seemed odd to me. He had a teenage kid by himself there. When he was walking out of the parking lot, and Trooper Somerville contacted him. I did notice the female exiting a vehicle heading towards Trooper Somerville, which ultimately was his grandmother.
And was that Deborah Carlson Johnson?
Yes.
Did you and or Trooper Colt seize the cell phone that Dominic had on that night?
Yes.
And ultimately, did Dominic Johnson leave, was he able to leave Cars with his grandma?
Yes, he did.
After that, so that was November 24th, did you contact anybody else in your?
Yes, on in between, it was on the 26th, just prior to the 26th, we were advised that a person that we wanted to speak with in the investigation was Alisa Bledsoe. She was listed as a runaway. On the 26th, investigator called me and was advised by her mother that she was stopping back by at the house and she was getting ready to leave again, and she was reported as a runaway. So obviously we wanted to speak with her on the investigation. We started headed in that area. Ultimately, she left in a vehicle prior to us getting there. However, we had Trooper Green, who assisted us in locating that vehicle, and he ended up stopping and contacting the vehicle on Bogard and Green Tree, I believe it was. I responded, go ahead.
Was that?
That was on the 26th, I believe.
So at this point in the investigation, David Grunwald is still missing.
Yes.
So there's a traffic stop. Is Alisa Bledsoe driving?
I don't honestly know who was driving. I showed up after Trooper Green was already there, obviously. Investigator Colt was there. When I showed up, Alisa Bledsoe was being interviewed by Investigator Colt in his vehicle, which I then was with Investigator Colt at that point. And we learned that Bradley Renfro was another person that we wanted to speak with in the investigation, who was also listed as a runaway, was in the vehicle that the traffic stop was on.
So Bradley Renfro was with Alisa.
Correct.
And without going into what if anything Bradley Renfro said on that day, did troopers talk to Bradley Renfro?
Yes.
And on that day, was Alisa allowed to leave?
Yes, they both were.
Did you have occasion to make contact again with Bradley Renfro?
Yes, I did.
And when was that?
It was actually three more separate occasions. One was on the 30th when we were working, we were assisting the Westfield Police Department on an investigation around 6 a.m. And then subsequently in that investigation, we contacted him, I believe it at his mother's house, I think, of Squaw Loop.
On November 30th, when you contacted Bradley Renfro, he was at his mom's house?
I believe it was at his mom's house, but in the investigation just prior to that, we had responded to 360 Spruce, where we contacted Devin Peterson, Dominic Johnson, Austin Barrett, and then I think that was it. And then ultimately, Renfro was also involved in that investigation, so we were able to,
So then you went.
then we went over there, correct.
So when you contacted Dominic Johnson, Devin Peterson, Austin Barrett, where were they at? What
They were at
they
the 360 Spruce.
And whose house is that?
I believe that was Deborah's house, which was Dominic Johnson's grandmother.
And what were those Dominic Johnson, Devin Peterson, Austin Barrett doing when you contacted them at that house?
When I got there and I contacted them, they were all together. They were being separately interviewed. Obviously, it was a different investigation, so also the police department was there, and they were in a centralized room to the right as you go in the house, and then periodically one of them would be kind of swapped out and interviewed separately for that investigation.
About what time was that you were contacting them?
It was around 6 a.m. when we headed over there to that 360 Spruce address.
And you said they were all in the same room together?
They were in the same house when I got there, and then
Okay.
basically in the same room later on.
How did you observe that they were interacting? How were they interacting with each other?
I mean, they were pretty quiet. In the room I was at, I was basically just kind of standing around with them, with the grandmother a lot, and we were just normally they were just talking amongst themselves, and I was kind of listening, and we were just having, I guess, normal conversation at that point, because an interview was being conducted in a different area there, so I was basically just sat there to watch them.
What about cell phones? Any cell phones collected at that time?
There was at least one cell phone collected. I think Dominic Johnson had a different cell phone than the one that we collected on the 24th.
And his phone, Dominic Johnson's phone, that new phone was taken then?
Yes.
Do you recall if Devin Peterson also had a phone that was seized that day?
I don't remember for sure, so I don't want to give you a bad answer.
I'm going to draw your attention to November 29th. Did you have occasion to go to Erick Almandinger's residence?
Yes, I assisted in the search warrant off of Esty.
And what did you do to assist in the search warrant?
Initially on the search warrant, after we did basically securing the scene, finding out where everybody was, my job was to check the outer portion outside of the residence and the outbuildings, which would be to the west of the main residence, Mr. Allmendinger's residence. And there's like a garage, there's a travel trailer. The first thing that I came up to or was coming towards was a travel trailer. As I'm pretty far away, actually, I get this very, very strong odor of bleach. And it seemed odd to me. As I continued walking towards the travel trailer, where the main door is to get inside the trailer, the smell kept getting stronger and stronger and stronger of bleach. to where I got to the front of the door of the trailer, and it was obviously at its strongest smell.
Did you go inside?
No.
So how, when you say the front door, were you, about how far away?
Where I initially smelled it, it was at least 15 feet. I was pretty far away when I initially smelled it, and that was basically the closest thing to me at that point. So that's why I walked towards it. And after I smelled that, I contacted the rest of the investigating members on scene, who ultimately contacted Sergeant Wegson, and we impounded it for further investigation.
The November 30th contact with Dominic, Devin, and Austin together at that house. Was there any contact after November 30th where you've got the group together?
Yes,
Can you tell me about that?
that was December 2nd. December 2nd in the morning, I was contacted to assist in locating several individuals involved that were coming from the Valley Hotel in Palmer, which we found them. There's the main street down there. It's near the Valley Hotel, basically in the alleyway, where we contacted Dominic Johnson, Bradley Renfro, Devin Peterson, Austin Barrett, and Alisa Bledsoe.
About what time was that?
It was in the early morning. I can't remember the time.
10 a.m.?
That sounds about right.
And that was on December 2nd?
Yes.
And when did you first, when you get there, when did you first see the group of them?
They were coming out of the alleyway near, I think what now is like a Papa John's right there on the corner. Yeah, there's a Mexican restaurant across the street.
How far away were you from them?
I'd probably say when I initially observed him, I was probably 25 yards, and then I parked my vehicle and I went and contacted him with the rest of the team members.
Were you, when you initially observed them, did you observe them walking away, or the front of, the front of them, or the back of them?
I initially saw him coming down the alleyway, like where I could see them, where I identified who they were, and I also had information they were coming that way. And then when we all started getting out of our vehicles, they kind of started splitting up a little bit, and then we kind of contacted them all and brought them together, and then they were transported to Palmer Post.
Did you notice anything about how they were acting, like interacting with each other when you first saw them?
They were together. I mean, that
Just
was,
that they were together?
yeah,
Did it appear they were talking to each other, or?
I can't remember.
So after they're contacted there, where did they go? Where do you take them?
They went to the Palmer Post. There was several people who assisted in transporting them to the State Trooper Post in Palmer. And then once we were there, they were all basically separated at that point. And at one point, I went ahead and assisted Sergeant Wegson in interviewing Devin Peterson.
On December 2nd, did you go back to Erick Almandinger's residence?
Yes, I did.
About what time did you go back to his residence?
It was in the evening because after Devin Peterson interview, just giving you a timeline here, at around 2 o'clock, myself and Sergeant Nelson went out on the Old Glen Highway to search a wooded area. And while we were out there, we got information from Sergeant Wegson that there was a possible location of the body off of Connect River Road, Mr. Grunwald's body. And then we immediately responded there. That was near mile 6 of the Connect River Road. Once arriving there on scene, Sergeant Wegson was already there. I went ahead and assisted in the on-scene investigation, securing the scene. I walked down through a wooded area from a pullout near mile 6 of Connect River Road, following kind of a creek for a while. I came into an opening where there was a large tree where I observed David Grunwald's body. He was lying on his back, obviously deceased, and his clothes appeared to be the same clothes from the November 13th that we had, where he was last seen what he was wearing.
What time did you then arrive at Erick's house?
I could refer to my report. I know it was in the evening.
That was in the evening, okay.
Yeah.
When you got to the Allmendinger residence, what, if anything, did you observe?
I assisted in basically seeing security there also until we ultimately contacted Eric and he was transported to the state trooper post in Palmer.
Anyone else there at that residence?
Yes, when we arrived on scene there, my job was to kind of go around the back of the property just for security to see if anybody was either going to come out or if anybody tried to get out the back or if anybody was outside for that matter. And then I remember I went around the back side of the house, which is to the west, and there's like a I don't know if you call it a daylight basement that goes out the bottom of the house that leads back there. There's a back door, and I saw at least two people squirting out the back, which I contacted them, and I know one of them was Bradley Renfro, and I think the other one was Alisa.
Did you see Austin Barrett at that residence that evening?
I don't remember. Yeah, if I could refer to my report,
You would
maybe.
help refresh
Yeah,
your-
thank you.
Does that help refresh?
Yes,
And so was Austin, did you also observe Austin Barrett at that residence?
yes,
So it's Bradley Renfro, Alisa, and Austin Barrett.
yes.
Do you recall when you pulled up to the residence, do you recall if the trooper vehicles, did you have light sirens on? Can you explain what type of vehicles you guys were in?
I was in an unmarked vehicle, which doesn't have any decals or lights or anything visible. And I remember parking on the road, so from what I remember, I believe that we were parked up on, I know a lot of our vehicles were parked up on the road itself and not in the driveway. There could have been vehicles in the driveway, I just don't remember.
Did you have any contact with Bradley Renfro that evening?
When I contacted him out the back of the house, yeah.
How was he, without telling me anything you might have said, how was he acting?
He's quiet for the most part. They were, in all my experience, contacting people at houses and people running from us and running out the back of houses, to me, they were trying to get away without us seeing them.
What about Alisa? How was she?
Same thing.
And Austin Barrett, do you recall?
I don't recall what he was like.
I want to draw your attention to December 5th. Other than the Valley Country Store video, did you have occasion to collect other video footage from any other place?
Yes.
Where was that?
Mile 49 Holiday, which is basically near Parks and Pittman. Through the investigation, we learned that there could be some relevant surveillance footage at that location pertaining to the 13th and the 14th of November. So on the 5th of December, I went up there and contacted the manager. Me and the manager went through video footage in the back security room. There was footage, I want to say it was 10:53 in the evening on the 13th, which would have been the initial day that Mr. Grunwald went missing. At one point, just to describe the gas station, if you've never been there, you have the Parks Highway, you have Pittman Road, and the gas station sits on the north side of the Parks Highway from Pittman. The gas station has pumps on both sides, and it also has a subway in the gas station. And looking at the video, on the west side of where the pumps are located, where the subway entrance is, at around, I believe it was 10:53 in the evening, you see Bradley Renfro walk up to the gas pumps. He's carrying 2 containers, which were different colored, basically gas jugs, if you will. He drops them at the gas pumps. Then you see Bradley Renfro walk into the subway entrance. He goes to the cashier number 2, I believe it is. He pays for $10 in gas with a $20 bill, gets $10 in change. While this is going on, Dominic Johnson comes into view where the gas pumps are on the west side there. Dominic Johnson walks up to where the gas jugs are at and the gas pump is at, where Bradley Renfro was previously at, and stands there. Bradley Renfro then leaves after he gets his change, walks out the subway entrance, goes straight to the gas pumps where he meets up with Dominic Johnson and the gas containers, and then fills them with his gas. After they do that, then they both leave just out of camera view to the west. And to the west, there's like there's a main road. I think it's Meadow Lakes Loop or something like that, but it goes to the backside off the parks there, so there's an access road back there, which is out of view, but that's the direction they went.
So when you were watching the video, were you also recording that video with any device?
Yes,
And you collected that recording as evidence?
yes.
Judge, this will be state's proposed exhibit 15, probably a good breaking point, but I want to go ahead and move to admit that, and we'll go through that after.
No objection.
15 will be admitted, and I take it you'll play it after.
Yes.
Okay, members of the jury, we'll recess for our lunch break. Same schedule as yesterday, 1:20, come back, and we'll go back on record at 1:30. Can you keep me on record for a few minutes?
On the exhibit, do you see there's several files, right? You see those?
Yes.
So we're going to identify them for the record, which one we're going to play first. We'll do 5518. And if you could just tell the jury what's depicted in this file.
So this is, excuse me.
Can we turn out some of the lights?
Yeah.
So this is basically a depiction of the west side of the gas station. You would have the subway entrance on this side here. There's the subway door, comes in through here into the gas station. You have the gas pumps over here on the west side, Pittman Road, the Parks Highway's over here, and the side road comes over right over here where that light is.
And what are we seeing now?
So you see the individual coming from, this is the area of the side road, walking up to the gas pumps here and then dropping an item.
And who is that individual?
This is Bradley Renfro. Second individual you see coming over here goes to the gas pumps here where the 2 containers are dropped off. That's Dominic Johnson.
And now
And you see Bradley Renfro, which had been exiting through the subway doors, coming back out to the pump, meeting up with Dominic Johnson.
now what do they appear to be doing?
They appear to be filling up the containers that they brought over. And then you see him walking away with both containers, followed by Dominic Johnson and Bradley Renfro in front.
Did you see who had which container, or did one of them have both containers, or could you tell?
I couldn't really, it looked like Bradley was either carrying both of them. That's what it looked like on here.
And did you see in this video where Bradley and Dominic came from as far as a vehicle that they got out of, or?
You couldn't see that because that was just out of view of the camera here. But like I said, there is the Parks Highway, goes north and south over here, and then there's a side road that cuts off there that accesses the parking lot here on the west side, right where that light is. So they walked just out of view there. We weren't able to see anything else.
And 5506?
This is a close-up of the pumps on that side. So the other video was obviously further out. Now you can see the green container, the red container. Bradley Renfro approaching the gas pumps, dropping both containers. And then continuing on to the store where we saw him in the other video.
This is just a closer view of what we just watched.
Yes.
5514?
This is at the same view, and here you see Dominic Johnson up at the gas pumps, appears to be using his phone, and then he's met back out there with Bradley Renfro. He's filling up the fuel in the green container. Bradley Renfro is. Dominic looks like he's on the phone. And fuel in the red container by
Does
Renfro.
Dominic Johnson still appear to be on his cell phone?
Yes.
Do you note a time as far as,
Looks 10:56 p.m. on the 13th. And then looks like Bradley carries both containers away.
$5507?
So this is the subway door where you would see them come into from the pumps. This is Bradley Renfro walking in after he dropped the gas cans back there.
And what time is that?
That's showing 10:54, 50 seconds.
5515?
This is a view of the cashier 2 transaction station. Pays with a $20 bill. Pays for $10 in gas.
And is there a time for that?
10:55 and 11 seconds where it's at now. And then this, what you see here is a transaction. Basically, it's a transaction receipt of that actual going on. So you see the $20 in cash, $10 in change, $10 for fuel.
$5517?
This is the view coming from the cashier station where Bradley Renfro is, number 2. Then you see him walking towards the door on Subway, which is this side over here, heading out to the pumps.
That was Bradley Renfro exiting?
Yes.
5519?
This is the door right here to exit the building. The Subway obviously here, so Bradley Renfro coming across, leaving the gas station out to the pumps.
This is 5514.
Okay. This just shows that same view of Renfro dropping the gas cans and Dominic out there on his phone.
Okay. Okay, thank you. have what's marked as State's Exhibit 129 and 128. Judge, if I may approach? May I approach, Your Honor?
Yep, you may.
You're at 129.
Yes, 129 is the footage of transaction 2 camera at the cashier station, and it shows the transaction report listed for $20, paid for $20 for $10 in fuel and $10 change with the transaction number at the top and the cashier.
And 128?
128 is the subway entrance side on the west side of the building where Mr. Renfro was entering the building. Picture of him coming inside.
Move to admit.
Any objection?
No objection.
So admitted.
Those are all the questions I have. Thank you.
Okay, cross-examination.
I'm going to ask you some questions about the December 2nd surveillance at the Valley Hotel, okay?
Yep.
So you were there to surveil the location, right?
I was there, yeah, I responded to the area to get in position to surveil the area, yes.
And you saw Bradley Renfro there?
I ended up seeing them when they came down the alley all together.
Okay, so Bradley Renfro.
Correct.
Austin Barrett was with Bradley Renfro.
Correct.
Dominic Johnson was with them also.
Correct.
Alisa Bledsoe was there.
Yes.
And Devin Peterson was there.
Correct.
No Erick Almandinger there,
No.
right? I'm going to ask you a couple questions about seizing the phone from Dominic Johnson at Cars.
Okay.
So you were there when the phone was seized from Cars?
Yes.
There was another police officer with you at the
Yes.
time? And you're aware that Dominic Johnson later sent a text message saying that he wanted to take a swing at one of the officers, right?
Oh, that I don't remember.
Okay. And I'm just going to ask you a couple questions about November 30th at Spruce Road in Wasilla, okay?
Okay.
So you responded there because there was an investigation ongoing,
Correct.
and it was Wasilla PD was the main investigating
That's
agency
correct.
there?
Correct.
But Alaska State Troopers assisted as well.
That's correct.
And what was being investigated was a gunpoint robbery, right?
That's correct.
And initially, Bradley Renfro was the suspect in the gunpoint robbery.
I believe so.
And later, the suspect of the gunpoint robbery became Dominic Johnson.
I don't know who the suspect was later on. I just know that when we went to the address, the individuals I listed before us who we contacted there.
Okay, and when you got there, you saw Dominic Johnson there,
Correct.
and Dominic Johnson was with Austin Barrett,
Correct.
and the two of them were with Devin Peterson.
Yes.
Again, no Erick Almandinger there,
That's correct.
and Erick Almandinger was not part of that investigation.
Not that I'm aware of.
Thank you, I have no further questions.
Any redirect?
Just a couple, Judge. Thank you. December 2nd of 2016, who was it that, you responded to the Valley Hotel, you said that morning?
Correct.
So, and then that evening you were at Erick Almendinger's house?
That's correct.
And who was observed at Erick Almendinger's house?
That was Bradley Renfro, Alisa Bledsoe, and Austin Barrett.
And were you aware at that time that Dominic Johnson had taken other troopers and investigators out to the scene of where David Grunwald was located?
Yes.
That evening on December 2nd?
Yes.
The investigation from November 30th, the investigation of the robbery, to your knowledge, were any arrests made in that case?
Not that I know of. I didn't, especially not that morning. No.
Those are all my questions.
Okay.
No further questions.
All right, thank you, sir. You can step down.
Nathan Rochlow, Nathan Rocheleau.
Your occupation, sir?
I'm a deputy fire marshal.
Thank you so much.
Okay, again, Ms. Howard?
Thank you. How long have you been a deputy fire marshal?
12 years.
And do you work for the state of Alaska?
I do. I work for Department of Public Safety, Division of Fire and Life Safety with the state.
Prior to being deputy fire marshal, did you hold any other positions with the state of Alaska?
No.
Can you describe your educational background for the jury?
Well, it's extensive. I got a 4-year degree from the University of Alaska Fairbanks, Bachelor of Technology in Emergency Services. I had a 2-year degree in Associates of Applied Sciences and Fire Science. Extensive training. Been to the Alaska State Law Enforcement Academy in Sitka. Hold a basic police certificate. Multiple training in fire investigation. I've been to the National Fire Academy in Maryland, 2-week fire origin and cause class. National Fire Academy electrical aspects class. Do you want me to keep going?
Yes.
International Association of Arson Investigators. I've been to 2 week-long seminars where we do training in multiple different aspects in fire investigation, from fatal fire investigation to motor vehicle fire investigation to commercial motor vehicle fire investigation, photography, forensic photography, shoe and tire impression evidence collection, fire debris evidence collection.
Received a lot of training in your field.
I have, yeah.
Would you say hundreds, if not thousands of hours?
I don't know about thousands of hours, but hundreds is a good estimate.
Have you been qualified in Alaska courts as an expert in the area of fire investigations?
I have.
And that was your role in this case, is that right? You responded to the scene of the Bronco.
Correct.
Judge, I'm going to go ahead and move to qualify as an expert in fire origin and causation.
No objection.
So certified as an expert.
So how did you become involved with this investigation?
I received a call from Alaska Bureau of Investigation, ABI, investigator Jason Fieser on November 15th at approximately, can I refer to my report?
Yes, if it'll help refresh your recollection.
12:08 p.m. Regarding a Bronco that they had found off a trail, burned out.
And so what did you do based on that phone call?
I responded with Deputy Fire Marshal Sven Hall, who's another fire marshal in our office. We both responded there. Arrived at the trailhead off North Solitude Street about 3:02 p.m.
And what did you observe when you arrived there?
Well, when we arrived, we had to park the vehicle, and we gathered our gear, and then we had to walk about a quarter mile up this rutted out trail. And I would consider it like a four-wheeling trail, but it was larger than an ATV trail. You could get a car up it. It's about a quarter mile up the rutted out trail, and I know that when I was walking up there, we were just kind of look around and make observations, things that we see, and I just made note that there was some fresh scrapes. The temperature was roughly about 27 degrees out. It was a clear day, so not extremely cold, but enough in November that the ground's frozen, and I remember seeing a lot of the scrapes, like they look like fresh scrapes that were on the ground from like a vehicle bottoming out.
Did you observe the Bronco?
Yeah, when I finally got to the Bronco, it was parked, it would have been facing up the trail or north, so I was able to observe the rear of the Bronco first.
And so when you get to a scene such as this, when you're investigating a fire of a vehicle, what is it that you do first? And specifically in this case, what did you do first for your investigation?
Well, in fire investigation, obviously a vehicle is a little bit different than a structure fire investigation. You have, it's similar, but we work from the area of least amount of damage to the area of most amount of damage, but consider a car being kind of a small area. If you're working a structure fire, you would obviously have a larger area to look at. But one of the main things we do when we first get on scene is we make observations and notes in regards to areas around. So when we arrived, we walked around and probably just kind of looked within 50 yards up and down, just looking for anything of evidentiary value or anything that we needed to make note of. And then systematically, we approach every scene using the scientific method. And we basically work from the area of least amount of damage to the area of most amount of damage, making observations of fire patterns and movement and intensity patterns.
Mm-hmm. And did you take photos at that scene or no?
Yes, I did.
And then was the troopers already there when you arrived?
No, the troopers weren't there when I had arrived. They had been there, so a lot of the initial information was kind of passed on to me by the troopers. One thing that I noted on the vehicle was that it was a two-door, 1995 two-door Bronco, an XL Eddie Bauer edition. And I could tell it was a Bronco because it had that fiberglass canopy on it.
And so what did you note? So you did a first overall view of you said you start out with the least amount of damage. So how did you go about, what did you observe?
So initially just walking around the vehicle, I was able to kind of look. There was the doors were in the open position, and some of the debris had fallen out of the vehicle. And so to get some clarification on why some of this debris was out on the vehicle, I made a phone call to the investigative freezer, and I found out that they had originally been up to the Bronco to look for any initial evidentiary value items that would have been on the floorboards to possibly find out, more information on the missing team.
And what if anything came of that conversation that aided in your investigation?
Well, one of the things I wanted to know, because when we talk about movement and intensity patterns, if you have doors open or doors closed, it can have a lot of significance in the way you view a pattern, the way that a fire pattern may show on a vehicle.
And was there anything that you gleaned from that?
Yeah, one of the things that was interesting is if I was starting in the area of least amount of damage, when I looked initially at the rear of the Bronco, it had the spare tire, the little bracket with the spare tire on the back. And the aluminum molding that was in the back was damaged where the tire had burned away, and then leaving the metal ring. So if you consider, we consider this a total burn. One thing to note, if I can back up, is that this fire, nobody ever responded to put the fire out. So it burned till self-extinguishment. So that has a lot to, it can take a lot of the evidence away because it's what we consider a total burn. So there was no suppression, no fire suppression, no water put on it. And it happened at night, so nobody observed any smoke to call anything in. So it basically just sat there until all of the combustible materials had burned away, and then leaving no fuel left for it to burn. So you just have, a metal frame basically. So the whole thing was burned out.
If I, and you already admitted, Judge, if I may approach the man. Show you States Exhibit 134.
Yeah, this is the rear of the vehicle.
Is there anything in that photo that was significant, or can you kind of explain to the jury as far as your investigation of the cause of the death?
I don't believe this is my photo.
Okay. Do you recognize that photo though, as the photo of the Bronco?
I mean, I recognize the Bronco, but this isn't my photo.
Okay. You talked earlier about the tire that's on the back of the Bronco.
Yeah.
Can you explain that with respect to this photo?
So the tire just being on the back of the vehicle, and it's basically a spare tire. It's on the outside of those older Ford Broncos. The amount of soot that's in the back of the vehicle here just is because you've got rubber that's burning. It creates a lot of soot, and then that soot is kind of basically adhered, or when you have when soot adheres to a cooler surface, it'll leave a soot staining. As you go around the vehicle, one thing significant, I'm sure in later photos, you'll see more clean burn, which it's burning hotter, longer, more intensity. So it'll clean off. So one of the things that I noted in the back here is there's you've got the fiberglass canopy, and there's a lot of the fiberglass that's still intact, or it had fallen through in the back rear compartment. Had the fire started in the rear of the vehicle, there would be less of that, or less sooting in the back. There would be more clean burn to the metal. What photo do you want me to look at?
How about Exhibit 131?
Exhibit 131 is a photo of the passenger side of the vehicle. One thing that you can see here is, again, the soot staining that's occurring where the tire would have been burning in the rear of the vehicle. And then the clean burn that's, obviously the door is in the open position, and the clean burn that is on the passenger door. And that left, there's kind of a V pattern, and what we call a V pattern. If you consider you had a fire, on a wall, and I'm gonna just talk structure fire here, but consider a V pattern. I'm gonna explain kind of what a V pattern is. If you had a fire that's on the floor along the wall, and it burns upward and outward, you'll see somewhat of a V on that drywall, okay? Here, in this photo, you can see the left apex, or the left, there's kind of a V pattern, and then the lowest amount of burning is towards the bottom near the kick plate, or the door jamb, and then further as you go front, and this isn't the greatest picture, but if you have another picture of the hood.
133.
Okay, exhibit number 133 is a picture of the hood, and one of the things that I was able to look at here is you've got a real distinct line of demarcation on the hood, and it's what we call a radial pattern, and that's an outward pattern. But the further you get towards the front of the hood, there's still paint and primer that's flaking on the hood, and there's less of that towards the passenger, or towards the passenger front window. One thing I was able to note too, if I go back to exhibit number 131, the only window glass that was still intact was near the bottom of the passenger side front window and the wing window. You see that little window that's in the passenger side? There's a wing window. There's a tiny bit of glass that's left. So one thing that you can, with the safety glass that's in cars, it has like a plastic film, and it's like a laminated film that's on there. And with this glass, we were able to see that the fire, as it starts in the compartment, it heats up and all of the hot gas layers go to the top and it banks down. And as that heat goes to the top and it banks down the compartment, it actually pulls that glass inside the door or inside the door frame. So it's like pulling towards the intense heat or the heat that's in the compartment itself. So think of, you're in a box or a compartment or room and you have a fire on the floor. Where does the hot gases go? It goes to the top layer, okay? And as that banks down, that's when everything starts to heat up and get hot enough where everything in there becomes basically involved, just from radiant heat.
Could you tell, based on your examination on this day of the vehicle, did you make a determination as to where the fire started?
I mean, we had a lot of questions to ask. I mean, obviously the first time, the initial examination, we looked at it, we were able to kind of go through in compartments, so from least to most. So we worked the rear compartment and we ruled that part out, or we eliminated that part. And then we got to the front, we had questions about that, but obviously you gotta move to the engine compartment. And so we didn't have like a huge crowbar or anything, but we were able to kind of improvise, and we grabbed a huge tree branch. I mean, it wasn't huge, but one that wasn't gonna break if we were to, shove it in the. But the hood was latched and locked, so it was latched and locked. And so the only way to open it up, because the fire had damaged that latch, we weren't able to just flip the hood latch to open it like normal. So we just like a birch tree and just shoved it in there and pried it open. And then when we pried it open, the metal skin from the hood kind of came off, but then we were able to kind of, eventually get the hood open. When we opened the hood, most of the rubber hoses and a large part of the aluminum components to the engine were burned and damaged, but a lot of the aluminum was just kind of pooled. But one thing that we were able to tell is that the amount of damage based on some of the radio patterns, the amount of damage in the engine was not consistent with an engine compartment fire. You would have more damage to the engine compartment itself. But think of this, so all vehicles have like a firewall, and that firewall is basically, if you have an engine fire, it kind of protects you from you being the passenger. But those firewalls have penetrating holes where the steering column comes through, electrical components come through. So you have a path for the fire to travel through. So one of the things that we were able to observe was that it appeared that the fire had, at this time, had traveled from the passenger compartment through those pre-existing penetration holes to the engine compartment and then caught some of those components. And obviously with an engine, you've got oil, gasoline, you've got, the gas rails that are on top of the engine block, and you've got a lot of stuff going on there. One other observation that we made in this whole thing, one of the things that we have to do when we're doing fire investigations, we have to eliminate. So we were able to, with all of the electrical wires that run through a vehicle, all the insulation, the plastic insulation, so all of that was burned off. Anything that was combustible was burned. But we were able to see the copper wires. And one of the things we have to do is we have to look at that copper wiring to basically look for any abnormalities in the electrical wiring. You could have arcs or beading, which would which would ask a question. We never saw any of that. As well as back in the engine compartment, we looked at the battery and some of those components, and some of the battery was still intact. So like I said, the movement patterns that happened from the passenger compartment to the engine compartment were that where we believed that it had started in the passenger compartment at that point.
And you eliminated the electrical causes?
Yes.
Did you have an opportunity to re-examine this vehicle in a different location?
Yes, we did. As soon as we were able to initially do the observations on the initial scene investigation, I called Investigator Feeser to secure the vehicle. He told me that Manusca Towing and Recovery, MTR, was going to be picking the vehicle up and transporting to secured storage in their yard in Palmer. And that occurred. And then later, that following Monday, I believe it was the 21st of November, we went back and re-examined the vehicle, basically getting a lot more detailed in a warmer environment, going through it systematically again, using what we call a layering technique, looking for anything of evidentiary value at this point. And of course, remember, a lot of this information was not only being passed to, Alaska State Troopers, but they were also giving me information too, just in regards to the case.
To assist in your examination?
Yeah, I mean, it's all part of the data collection that we use in the scientific method.
Did anything about your examination on the 21st change what you originally thought from your first examination?
No.
What about keys? Did you locate any keys?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we were obviously doing, and one of the things we did was we took basically a plastic sheet of visqueen that we have in our work truck, and we laid it out. And so systematically we went through, the floorboards of the front seat, driver's side, floorboards of the passenger seat, driver's side, and we just basically went through. And any of the big items we would pull out and we'd sit on the visqueen. When we got to the driver's side, one of the things that I was able to locate was a set of keys, and it was directly underneath the driver's seat.
And what did that tell you, if anything?
Nothing, it was just a set of keys. But AST, some of the investigators were there, and they were like, hey, we'll take these, maybe these are the keys. We just wanted to find out whose keys they, maybe they did have some evidentiary value. One of the first folks that they got a hold of, I mean, they took the keys, and they went to Mr. Benjamin Grunwald and asked him, are these the keys to the Bronco? And they said they were the keys.
So so you find the keys underneath the driver's side seat. Now we see from the photos of the Bronco, there's really no cloth seat left in the Bronco.
No, there's not.
So were all the seats in the Bronco completely?
Yeah, like I said, all the combustibles, I mean, all the polyurethane foam, all of the seat material, anything that was, with the exception of a fair amount of the fiberglass topper on the back, there was no combustibles that we could identify at that point.
So we couldn't say whether the keys were left on the seat and fell through, or whether they were placed underneath the seat? We wouldn't be able to say.
We wouldn't be able to know. But, I mean, if they were sitting on top of the seat and, all of that material, it's naturally just going to drop. It's, it's heavy enough that it would just drop in the location that they were at.
And did you have another opportunity to examine the Bronco?
I did. So after we examined the vehicle again in the secured storage on the 21st, on the 22nd, I made a phone call to Special Agent, well, actually I made a phone call to ATF, and I was actually put in touch with the Special Agent Tana Lang Yarnell, who works out of the, she's a certified fire investigator, and she works out of Seattle office. And basically just to consult with her based on the totality of the case. And she agreed that, you know, she had interest in seeing the photos, so what I ended up doing was, being that there's distance and we couldn't, you know, go meet for lunch or anything, I sent her the photos via email. And she was able to go through the photos and called me back. And I'd have to refer to my report to get good on, you know, right on record, but she,
When she placed that phone, when you talked to her?
yeah, I called her on the 22nd of November at 3:25 p.m. And I sent her the photos. And then on December 1st at 7:48 a.m., she called me back, and we basically consulted over the phone on the photos that she had seen. And at that point, she had heard enough about the case, had seen the photos that I had. We talked about, you know, basically where I was at and where we were, and she agreed, but she felt that she had a vested interest in, you know, that's what the ATF does, is help state agencies and municipal agencies work on cases like this. So she was able to let me know that she would come up the following Monday, December 5th.
And did you search the Bronco or examine the Bronco again with the special agent?
We did. First, right after I got done talking to her, I called Sergeant Wegson, who was kind of the case officer on this, and I just told him what was going on. And I went and got a search warrant to re-examine the vehicle.
And where did you re-examine the vehicle at?
Same location. So in a heated storage garage at the MTR.
When you re-examined the Bronco, did you collect any samples from the Bronco?
I did.
Okay, and what did you collect?
So to get more detailed on that examination, the third examination with her, one of the things that we agreed that, so we didn't duplicate photos, she was going to take all the photos, and Deputy Fire Marshal Hall and myself were going to basically get dirty. And so what we ended up doing was we sifted basically the vehicle. We used these little basically dust brooms, and we got down to basically the floorboard looking for anything that we could possibly see. And one of the things that we were able to looking at the front driver and passenger compartment, was that we got down to what was kind of the metal. But there was still, adhered to the metal, there was still some carpet pad and some insulation, you know, sound barrier that they put in vehicles. And it was almost like glued to, which is somewhat typical. It was glued to, and when I say glued, not the word glued, but, you know, it was kind of stuck to the metal. And as we were prying that up, we noticed an odor similar to that of gasoline. And therefore, based on some of the information we had and the data that we collected, we decided that we were going to take samples and test for an ignitable liquid. And we took samples from the driver's floorboard, seat area, and kind of that hump, I mean, just that general area down by the seat and the floorboard, the passenger floorboard and seat area, kind of the transmission hump that's in a vehicle. And then we took a sample in the rear floorboard back near the rear seat.
And to your knowledge, were those samples then sent off for testing?
Yeah, Special Agent Lang Yarnell got a hold of one of the Anchorage special agents. They took custody of the samples. And one thing that's nice when you work with the ATF is you get the assistance of their labs to do the testing. So they took the samples, they sent them down to, I think it was Walnut Creek, California, which is where the ATF lab is, and they tested for the presence of an ignitable liquid.
Ultimately, based on your examinations, your training, your experience, and 3 examinations of the Bronco, what did you determine, where was the origin of this fire?
Well, not to jump ahead, but I should say that the testing came back positive for the presence of gasoline in both the front driver's side floorboard and passenger side floorboard, and nothing came back for the rear seat floorboard, rear seat area. Therefore, with all that data that we collected, all that information that we had, the patterns that we saw, my training, education, and experience, I was able to determine that the fire originated in the front passenger compartment, in the front passenger and driver's seat, and it was caused by the pouring of an ignitable liquid, and an open flame heat source was used to ignite that liquid, therefore causing the fire.
And how did you ultimately classify this fire?
I classified it as incendiary.
And what does that mean?
Well, it's one of the classifications we have for fire. So there's four classifications for fire. You have accidental, natural being, earthquake, a windstorm, tornado, something, a natural disaster caused the fire. Undetermined, meaning you've got information but you can't figure it out, and then incendiary, meaning, so incendiary means that a fire that occurs but is not supposed to occur, and it was deliberately set.
And, Your Honor, we do have stipulations as far as the testing of the samples that District Attorney Kalachek can read into the record.
We just want to read them into, because it goes right into his testimony. And Mr. Anacone got these, and he agreed to these. And I'm just going to read the part about the testing. It says, parties agree that if called as a witness, Jamie Bernkopf would testify to the following, and therefore the parties stipulate to the following facts. Number 1, Jamie Bernkopf is a forensic chemist working at ATF's Forensic Science Laboratory in San Francisco, California, and has been employed in that capacity from the year 2009 to present. Number 2, his duties include chemical and physical analysis of evidence submitted to the laboratory. Number 3, in December of 2016, he used laboratory instruments, specifically an Agilent 6890M gas chromatograph, to analyze the following exhibits. Number 1, a gallon can containing burned debris from the passenger floorboard of David Grunwald's Bronco. Number 2, a gallon can containing burned debris from the driver floorboard of David Grunwald's Bronco. Number 3, a quart can containing burned debris from the rear back seat area floorboard. Stipulation number 4, the analysis revealed that exhibits 1 and 2 each contain gasoline, which is an ignitable liquid. And stipulation number 5, the analysis revealed that no ignitable liquids were identified in exhibit 3, which was the quart can containing burned debris from the rear back seat area floorboard. And that's it for this topic.
Those are all my questions. Thank you.
If a person told you that, or if a person told police that gasoline was dumped inside the car and inside the Bronco and then lit with the branch, would that be consistent with your findings?
Can you rephrase the question?
Yeah, let me try to. If a person told the police that they dumped gasoline inside all over the inside of the Bronco, and then lit it with a branch. Would that be consistent with your findings? Would that start a fire similar to what you analyzed here?
Yes, it would start a fire.
Okay. No further questions.
Redirect?
I don't, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Step down.
Ms. Deborah Gillis is our next witness.
Okay.
She's on the bench out there.
Come on up, man.
Retrace this chair. Would you remain standing, please? Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear and or affirm that the testimony you give in this case now before this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please proceed. Please state and spell your first and last name for the record, please.
Deborah, Debra, Gillis, Gillis.
And what is your application?
Forensic scientist. Good afternoon.
First of all, can you tell the jury where you work?
I work at the Alaska Scientific Crime Detection Laboratory in Anchorage.
And every day?
Yes.
And what specifically do you do at the laboratory?
The disciplines I work are in biological screening, in which I did not do any work in this case, and then as a firearm and tool mark examiner.
And when you say firearm and tool mark examination, what type of things are you talking about?
I do function tests, distance determinations, shot pattern determinations, serial number restorations, tool mark examinations. I do mostly bullets and cartridge case comparisons, but also shot shells. And then I write reports and occasionally testify in court.
And what type of training have you had? Education and training, which lends itself to your duties.
I have 2 Bachelor of Science degrees, both attained in 1986 from the University of Alaska, Anchorage. One is biological sciences and the other is chemistry with a biochemistry option. And then after I was hired at the crime lab, I was lucky enough to be accepted into the 14 students of that year, an ATF-sponsored program to train firearm examiners. It's a year-long program, and the first phase is 3 months, 3.5 months of administrative assignments. The second phase is 15 weeks in Maryland at the National Firearm Examiners Academy. The third phase was back at our home laboratories doing research project, PowerPoint presentation on that research, mock court cases. I think I did 4 mock cases. And then the last 2 weeks was back for graduation, presenting our research, as well as going through 2 mock trials.
And what year was that?
2003 to 2004,
And then how long have you worked at the firearms section of the laboratory?
since February 2003.
And was it just you by yourself since 2003? Or did you have a colleague with you?
My coworker is now retired. It was just he and I from 2003 to the end of 2016, I believe.
And how about currently? Is it-
I'm the only one. We've got somebody in training, and hopefully she'll join the team here in October.
And have you been qualified before as an expert in firearms identification and examination
Yes, I have.
and tool mark?
Firearm, yeah, each separately, yes.
And have you testified in courts around the state
Yes.
as recently as when?
Last Wednesday.
And what was that?
in Juneau.
And was that about a firearm issue?
Yes, it was both screening and firearms, but the firearm was the main issue.
All right. And when we talk about matching either fired projectiles or spent casings to a firearm, what discipline are we talking about? What is the official name of that?
Firearm identification.
I would move to qualify Ms. Gillis as an expert in firearm identification at this point.
No objection.
Okay, she is so certified.
Thank you. Tell us a little bit about what equipment, what the facilities at the lab look like that you operate in, what equipment you have, what type of range or other contraptions you might have to capture projectiles, and just kind of give us an idea of that.
Currently, we have space for 4 different examiners, so it's a little empty in the firearms section. We've got 2 comparison microscopes, and that's our bread and butter. It's basically 2 compound microscopes. The left ocular is set up for the left stage and the right ocular to the right stage, and so I can put tests and unknowns together there, and it's combined through an optical bridge. And it's got a hairline, so where I can move that hairline back and forth. Move totally to the right, I can see the full left stage. Move totally to the left, I can see the full right stage. And so I can overlay that evidence, bullets or cartridge case, shot shells, tool marks, and then move that hairline back and forth to see if I've got enough agreement to make an identification or elimination. We also have a range with a water recovery tank that we use for basically round-nosed bullets. Hollow points will mush and disintegrate. High-velocity rifle bullets will also disintegrate in the water. So we shoot those in a Kevlar bullet recovery tank. And it's full of Kevlar, like the vests in the police officers' protective garments. We have a secure firing device if I suspect a firearm is unsafe, that I can shoot that in. We've got some stereo microscopes, just it helps see in 3D, like serial numbers, some fine-tuned, where I need a little bit of help looking at maybe the head of a cartridge case or how many lands and grooves on the bullet.
And may I ask a couple other things about the crime laboratory? Do you have a gun library there?
Yes.
And what's the purpose for having a collection of guns at the crime laboratory?
Mostly for parts. If I've got a broken piece on a firearm, I can exchange it. Also, if I'm having trouble with one firearm, I can go into the reference collection, see if I'm having the same issue. Is it that specific firearm that was the issue, or is it all of these that has that issue? Or I like to go in there before court and get familiar with the firearm that I have in court, just to refresh my memory on safeties and functions and things like that.
And how many guns do you figure you have in that library?
I think the last estimate was about 1,500.
And do you also have ammunition on hand in case you need to test a gun or develop some spent casings at the lab to compare to a spent casing the police have found?
Yes, frequently no ammunition is submitted with the firearm, so we've got a laboratory reference collection for ammunition as well.
And then do you also have things like spare magazines if magazines haven't been provided with the firearms?
Yes.
Now, I imagine there's a lot of different magazines. Do you try to have a magazine for every handgun, for every pistol, or?
Sometime the make will be interchangeable with other, say a Ruger magazine might be good for, like the P series is good for a lot of the P series Ruger magazines, and so no, I don't need the specific model. Some of them do. I need the very specific model to. They're not interchangeable, but a lot of them are.
Let me turn your attention to some physical exhibits. Turning your attention to State's proposed exhibit number 1. I always point it down at the floor in the courtroom, just how I've done it. But I'm going to ask you to take State's exhibit number 1, proposed exhibit number 1 from me. Take a look at it. First of all, if you could just verify that this gun is completely safe to make sure that everybody's at ease here when we talk about this firearm.
Yes, it is safe. It is unloaded and secured with the locking device.
All right. And is there a magazine in it as we speak or not?
No.
All right. And likewise, when the lock, let me get back to my microphone. As the lock is installed right now, the gun is in the open position. Is that correct?
Correct. The slide is locked back.
All right. So if this gun was loaded in a manner to be carried or fired, would the slide be in that position or would it be in a different position?
No, the slide would be forward, and we call that at battery, so it's ready to fire.
And let me ask you a question. State's proposed exhibit number 1, was this one of the firearms that you tested in relation to this case?
Yes, it is.
And when you test things, the testing is done at the request of a police agency usually?
Correct.
And was that the case here where the troopers asked you to examine some firearms?
Yes, they did.
So turning your attention to this firearm, can you just first tell me who the manufacturer is and what model it is and what caliber it is?
This is a 9mm Luger caliber Springfield Armory model XDM.
And I think most people understand the difference between a revolver and a semi-automatic pistol, but this particular gun is which of those?
This is a semi-automatic pistol.
And tell us, what are the basic features that make a semi-automatic pistol a semi-automatic pistol, and if you could refer to this one in particular.
The main thing is the magazine. Revolvers have a revolving cylinder, and the pistols have a magazine. The function, this semi-automatic, meaning some of the functions are performed automatically. The chambering and then the extraction and ejection are all done by the gun.
And in this particular case, when the troopers sent you this gun, did they send you a magazine or not?
No, they did not.
All right. So how were you able to test this gun for functionality and also to produce some spent casings at the laboratory for the gun?
I used one of the magazines in our reference collection.
And for this particular gun, tell us how you would load it to shoot this gun.
I would load the magazine, and usually with the slide forward, then I would put the magazine in there. I'm doing this in the range, and then I would go ahead and rack the slide, pull the slide completely rearward, and then let it go to the at battery, the fully forward position before I shot it.
All right. And is there another way of loading it if the slide is pulled back, if it's locked back in the back position?
Another way of loading it?
Yeah, like can you also load the magazine and then hit the slide release and have the round picked up that way?
Yes, correct.
Now, I'm going to ask you to, I'll cover the next question with the other guns as far as the distinguishing features between the guns. But for this particular gun, let's talk about how it functioned. Did you fire this gun in the laboratory?
Yes, I did.
And how many rounds, do you remember how many rounds you fired from this particular gun?
2.
And did it work as it was supposed to work?
This gun is operable. 2 magazine-fed cartridges were loaded, fired, extracted, and ejected as designed.
And do you do you do some other testing like trigger pull on the gun?
Yes, I do.
And do you have an instrument for testing that?
Yes, we've got, it's, may I put this down for
Yeah.
a second? It's an L-shaped hook, and there are arsenal weights or postal weights that you put on the bottom, and then you hook that goes over the trigger. And in this case, I would point it straight up towards the ceiling, put the hook on the trigger, and then add weights until it goes off.
And what was the trigger weight for this gun, if you know?
I'll just double check my notes. Make sure I'm giving correct information. It held 5.5 pounds, and it went off at 6.
And for this particular gun, does this gun have any kind of external hammer or not?
No, this is a striker-operated semi-automatic pistol.
So you can't cock a hammer on this one, right?
No.
Okay. And also, does this gun have any safety features, like things that have to be done before a bullet can be fired from this gun?
Yes, this gun has a grip safety, so this has to be depressed. You've also got a trigger safety, so there's a small protruding piece of plastic that has to be flush with the trigger, that also in conjunction with the grip safety. And then it also has a firing pin block in the back that has to be depressed in order for the gun to go off. And that's when the slide is fully forward, there's the disconnector pushes up on that firing pin block. And in addition, we don't really call them a safety, but we include them in our talk. There's a loaded chamber indicator. It just sticks out a little bit when a cartridge is in the chamber. And then I believe this one has a cocked striker indicator. So you'd see a piece of silver in the back right here. You'd see a piece of silver when it was cocked.
So therefore, the only way to fire it is to actually pull the trigger, right?
Yes.
While having your hand around the back grip part too.
Yep.
Okay. And let's talk about the caliber, 9mm Luger, 9mm Parabellum. Is that a fairly typical caliber?
Yes, that's a nice medium-sized caliber. It's in the 38 class of ammunition.
And this box, do you recognize the writing on the envelope attached to this box that I pulled the gun out of?
Yes, I do.
Is that your writing?
Yes.
And are those the two casings that you preserved when you fired the gun at the laboratory?
Yes, they are.
And let me get an exhibit from the front. Turn your attention to what's been admitted as State's Exhibit Number 2. Ask you to take a look at it and see if the markings and the laboratory numbers are familiar to you.
Looking for my cheaters here just to see if I've got. Okay.
All right. Does that casing look familiar to you?
Yes.
All right. Did you receive that spent casing, which is now State's Exhibit Number 2, from the troopers for you to test?
Yes, I did.
Or when I say test, to compare to the casings you produced from Springfield?
Correct.
Now, I want to use some exhibits for this part, but first let me cover the other gun. I'll take that back, and then we'll talk about the testing. Okay? How many? Let me see. Let me get the other gun out. Now, turning your attention to State's proposed exhibit number 3. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to hand it to you, let you examine it. Do you recognize that firearm?
Yes, I do.
And tell us how you recognize it.
The serial number.
Was that firearm submitted to you likewise for testing in relation to this case?
Yes, it was.
Can you tell me the manufacturer of this firearm?
This is a Ruger semi-automatic pistol. It's a model P91DC, and it is a .40 Smith & Wesson caliber.
And then, when you hold it, I know we have some of the lights off because we're using the screen, but as compared to the Springfield XD, is this a full metal gun as far as the frame and the slide?
Yes.
And on the Ruger, as far as color, is the slide a little bit, are the colors a little bit different, or what can you tell us about that?
Yes, the slide is stainless steel, and the frame it's a dark gray metal. It might be aluminum based, but it's darker gray.
Now let's do a comparison between that and the Springfield XDM. Does this gun have an external hammer?
Yes, it does.
So what does that give you the ability to do with this gun?
This is both single and double action.
So to shoot this one, tell me the different ways you can shoot this particular pistol.
If I wish, if there was one loaded in the chamber, with the slide fully forward, I could cock the hammer if it wasn't already so, and I could shoot it that way, or I could shoot it just by pulling the trigger. So the double action means that the firearm does two functions. It cocks the hammer to the full rearward position, releases it, and it goes forward, and the gun will go off. Or I can cock the hammer and then pull the trigger. That's single action, and the trigger then performs one function, single action. It just releases the hammer from the sear, and it goes off.
And did the troopers provide you a magazine for this one?
No, they did not.
Did you have one in stock that fit this gun?
Yes.
And did you have .40 caliber ammo also?
Yes.
All right. And what can you tell us about shooting this gun?
This gun was operable. 2 magazine-fed cartridges were loaded, chambered, fired, extracted, and ejected as designed.
And how about the trigger pull? Similar to the other one or not?
Similar. The single action was 6 to 6.5, I believe. I'll double check. So it held 6 pounds. So again, with the arsenal weights hanging from the trigger, it held 6 pounds, and when I added that next half-pound increment, it went off. And for the double action, it held 11 pounds and went off at 11.5 pounds.
In terms of trying to figure out which gun was used to produce the spent casing that was found at this murder scene, I guess most people can probably eliminate the Ruger, right, just by the caliber?
Yes.
Okay. Are they interchangeable? For example, can you use a 9mm in a .40 and vice versa, or not?
The .40 will not fit in the 9, and the .40 was not designed to shoot a 9mm caliber.
All right, and in addition to you identifying the firearms for each of the boxes, the box I showed you that had the casings you produced, spent casings, that has your initials on it?
Correct. I always write the case number, the item number, the date, and my initials.
And likewise, the box that we pulled the Ruger out of, that also has your initials?
Correct.
All right, Lynn, yeah, if you can put that down temporarily. Now, I'm going to ask you to come up and use the portable microphone and just run some exhibits with you, run through some exhibits with you. I think, yeah, if you stand here, that'll probably be fine. I'm going to stand by the microphone. And these are proposed exhibits at this point. Let me run them by defense counsel, see if he has any objection to them. right, let's turn our attention to states. I would move to admit 137 through 144.
No objection.
Thank you.
No objection?
No objection.
Okay, so admitted.
And we'll explain the basis for the relevancy in a second here. Number 137, please. Ms. Gillis, can you tell us what's depicted? These are your photos, so can you tell us what's depicted in State's Exhibit number 137?
This is the Springfield Armory 9mm caliber pistol.
And the white writing on it, is that you? Is that your writing?
No, I believe this is with the K, that's a different analyst, Mr. Canaris.
All right. Turning your attention to the next one, State's Exhibit number 138.
And this is just the left side of the same 9mm Springfield Armory pistol.
All right, and for the slide to be held back, is there a certain mechanism on that side of the pistol that holds the slide in place if you want to leave it open?
Yes, the slide lock. And you just push up on this. When you pull the slide back, push up and it will fit in this notch.
And then what do you do to release the slide back into the forward position?
Just take your thumb or finger and pull it down, and it will go forward.
And then the other piece in front of it, that's just for disassembly of the gun?
Yes, that's a takedown. So you turn it and then pull it out, and you can take the slide off.
And then for people who may not be familiar with that type of pistol, the button at behind the trigger?
Oh, that's your magazine release, so it pops the magazine out.
Okay. And then you mentioned the grip safety before. Can you just reiterate it on this photograph?
It's a little hard to see, but, well, maybe not. It's this protuberance here.
Now let's turn our attention to number 139. Tell us what that is.
This is the discharge cartridge case, the 9mm Luger discharge cartridge case I received, and these are my scribe marks. It's upside down, but 6-5426G, my initial, and then 6. So the case number is 16, but we just put 6. The lab number is 5426. My initial, Mr. Shem used an S, I used a G, and then the last item number is 6.
And just so we're clear, this is a photo of the casing that's contained in State's Exhibit number 2?
Yes.
Okay. Let's go to the next one. Number 140, please.
And this is the discharge cartridge case head. It's got the head stamp of FC 9mm, so 9mm Luger, or 9mm, and then the Luger.
All right, now, so we know the gold part is part of the casing, which holds the powder and the projectile, right?
Correct.
Now, tell us what that silver thing in the middle of the base of the casing is.
That's your primer, and you can pop out, once this is discharged, you can pop that out and reload it if you're interested in reloading. But that's a soft lead. It's much softer than the copper head.
And the indentation in the middle of the silver sphere, what is that?
That's the firing pin impression. So that's when the trigger was pulled, the striker had the firing pin, it hit the primer ignited, then it ignited the powder inside the cartridge case, and the gases started forming, and the bullet was pushed out of the barrel.
Anything that you think the jury should know about this photo, and any characteristics of the base of this spent cartridge?
The only thing I noticed right here looking at it is this, I don't know if you can see, this is a firing pin drag, and that's very common in semi-automatic pistols. You will not get that in a revolver.
And then what is that caused by? Movement of the firearm, or what is that caused by?
During the recoil, these recoil autoloaders, the barrel, to reduce your recoil, it pivots down, and with the firing pin is still there, so the recoil is happening faster than the firing pin can pull back. So your firing pin is still in the primer, and it drops down, and so you get that little tick mark, so the firing pin drag moves the metal.
All right. And if this were a live round, And if we were looking at the bottom of a live round, would the silver all be flat without any kind of indentation on it as far as the primer?
Correct. It would just be smooth.
Let's go to number 141. Now, these are more the technical ones. Can you tell us what 141 is?
This is, and since the others were flipped, I'm not 100% sure.
Of the orientation?
Yeah, I think the right has to be the test, and the left is the evidence bullet.
Okay.
Yeah, it's got to be the. So the right-hand view, can you see the hairline in the middle? That's the That's what I see under the scope, the optical hairline. And so I moved it into a position such that I could see part of the test and then part of the evidence. And it seemed it's not quite as clear as I saw it on my computer this morning. Doesn't seem like. It seems like there's a lot of shine.
Well,
But
okay.
oh.
Go ahead.
But this was an identification of I identified this cartridge to the test in two different ways. Sheared primer orifice crater stria, which is just a big term for when that firing pin is in the primer and the firearm pulls down. It also, the metal on the lead primer gets soft, and so it oozes into spaces. And the hole that houses the firing pin, that's where this raised area is. It oozes into the open area around the firing pin. And so when it drops, it shears off part of the metal on the primer. And so those make really nice identifications. And so this is mark here, and this mark goes with here, this here. I mean, we can go up, back and forth. And that's just in this area that you can make these correspondences.
Right. And let me give you the photograph 141, and it is in the right orientation as you testified. And let me ask you, I'm going to grab a microphone to. I'm going to ask you some questions about this photograph, and I want to be a little bit closer. You said the right is the test. Does that mean it's one of the cartridges, the bottom of one of the cartridges that you fired in the lab?
Yes, it's one of the test fires that I fired from the gun in the range and collected.
And you say this is under the microscope, right?
This is under my comparison microscope.
And you said there's a split where the split allows you to compare the test fire to the spent casing that was submitted to you. Can you show the jury where that split is on this photograph?
The hairline, it's best seen on this abrupt, because it's not completely lined up, the primers. This primer looks a little bit smaller. So this is your hairline right here. So everything to the right of it is my test. Everything to the left is the cartridge case that I received as the evidence.
Exhibit number 2.
Correct, I'm sorry, exhibit number 2.
Right, and everything to the left of it is the bottom of exhibit number 2, the base of exhibit number 2.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Anything else about this image, number 141, whether from the photograph or from the screen, that you think might be additionally helpful to the jury?
No, the photo was mainly taken for the orifice crater stria, but you can also see some of the correspondence on the primer as well. And the other photo has better view of that, split apart.
How many times magnification is this? Do you know the microscope? About how many more times than the human eye? Do you know how the power is? I guess is what I'm getting at.
I usually shoot it between 14x and 18x, so it's not bad. It's not huge magnification, which might be 140, because the oculars are 10, and then the scope is 14 or 18.
Now let me turn your attention. I can grab that back from you. Let's go to number 142, please, on the screen. And then I'm going to hand you a photo in case this is better. And is this the same situation where the test-fired cartridge base is on the right?
Correct.
and states the base of the cartridge, which is states exhibit number 2, is on the left.
Yes, I always put tests on the right and evidence on the left.
And then again, the middle, if it's not completely obvious, can you show us where that separation line is again on this one?
And it's right down the middle here, the hairline difference. So everything to the right is the test, everything to the left is exhibit number 2.
And what characteristics are you comparing between the test-fired casing and the casing submitted by the troopers?
And on this photo, I was looking at the parallel straight lines, as well as starts and stops. So different manufacturers, you'll get stacked semicircles or cross-hatching. This is called parallel straight lines. So your straight line here, straight line at the bottom, straight line, but these are starts and stops. So you want to look at your starts and stops as well, because those are absolutely individual characteristics. And you can just go right at, this is a nice identification, and then the 2 up here, 2 here, and then up here. So, and then the big broad straight line up at the top.
And then what you're trying to figure out is whether the casing from the scene submitted by the troopers was fired from the XD, from the Springfield XD.
Yes, I'm trying to see if I have sufficient agreement. Are there enough reproducible, unique features that I can call an identification? And in this case, I could both on, and then here the orifice striae are washed out from the, I have strong fiber optic lights, but on the other photo, the orifice striae was one ID, and then I can make a second ID independently based on the straight line striae and the starts and stops of the pattern.
So is it your expert opinion that the spent casing that was forwarded to you by the troopers was fired from the Springfield Armory XDM pistol?
Yes, it was.
Thank you. Let's go to number 143, please. And tell us what's contained on 143.
This is the left side of the Ruger Model P91 DC 40 caliber semi-automatic pistol.
Right. And what I was getting at about the color, here it looks like the color is pretty similar between the slide and the frame, but it's a little bit more apparent once you see the photo, the gun in person, that the colors are different.
We use really strong photography lights, and I know they're 1,000, and I'm not sure of the units, if it's watts or lumens, but they're very strong lights so that we can pull out some of the detail. The decock only, you can read the Ruger, the model number, you can read the signature by my coworker. So we use those big bright lights so that we can pull out some of the detail on the cartridge case heads and bullets and things. So it kind of did wash out the darker gray frame from the stainless steel frame, slide.
While we're on that, I want to ask you what that is.
It's just a protuberance with the hole in it. I don't know if it serves a function, but the magazine goes right in there and then it would be flush.
Does the magazine, does the loop thing still stick out when the magazine's in there, if you remember, if you know?
I do not know.
Okay. Is that made for a lanyard or a rope or whatnot?
Yes.
Okay. We'll look at the gun again, but let's go to the last one, please, 144. And what is depicted in 144?
This is the right side of the same 40. And to your previous question,
Yes.
I think it lies, the magazine is going to lie right here, flush with the slide here, but I'm not 100% sure.
All right. And while you're up here, let me get that gun. I want to ask you a couple of other questions about it.
Probably do need to take a break.
This is almost very close to the end here. Maybe 5 minutes. So back to the Ruger, states exhibit number 3. And I can hold it. This is what I was asking about, is this what I think is for a lanyard, maybe there could be for other purposes, I don't know. And do you believe the magazine, if seated, would be lower than that bump?
I do. Looking at the photo, you've got the frame. It extends further down than the holder here, the lanyard holder. So I do believe it runs flush to that, but I'm just not 100% sure.
Yeah. And is it fair to say, and I'm not going to get into like your ultimate opinion on whether this could be used to cut somebody or injure somebody, but is it fair to say that the lanyard, I'm going to call it a lanyard hole, or is it fair to say that this gizmo, let's call it a gizmo, is narrower than the rest of the base of this gun frame?
Significantly so.
And is it fair to say that it protrudes from the base of this frame?
Yes, again, significantly.
And just touching it, does it feel to have sharp edges?
It could, yes.
Thank you. Give me a moment here. Ask you about another gun. Kind of change gears here. And I'm going to show you some exhibits that haven't been admitted yet because we do them through another witness. But turning your attention to state's proposed exhibit number 121, does that look familiar to you?
Yes, it does.
And was that another gun that was submitted to you for you to test?
Yes.
All right. And did you bring a report on that one also?
Yes, it's included in my summary report for the others.
And what type of firearm is this?
This is a Ruger 357 Magnum caliber Ruger model Security 6 revolver.
And so it's yet a different caliber than the two firearms that we've discussed this afternoon?
The 357 is also considered a 38 caliber, of which the 9mm is as well. But the 9mm is rimless, so it is a semi-automatic pistol cartridge. And the revolver, it would be a larger cartridge for the 357 Magnum, as well as rimmed.
And then state's proposed exhibit number 122, do you recognize that also? Is it consistent with the features of the Ruger?
Yes, it is.
And what does that photograph show specifically?
This shows 6 live rounds, 4 live rounds and 2 discharged in the cylinder of this revolver.
And you didn't take these photographs, correct?
No, I did not.
But you have some separate ones of this gun?
Yes, minus the cartridges and cartridge cases.
And also turning your attention to number 123, what does that show?
This is the serial number of the firearm that I received at the laboratory for examination.
And the photograph is the bottom of the frame of the buttstock?
Yep, it's the bottom of the grip.
And it's a little fuzzy, but you can make out the serial number?
Yes, I can.
And is it the same as the gun you tested, the revolver you tested?
Yes.
And let me go back to my spot. Obviously, this revolver did not fire the 9mm spent cartridge, right?
Correct.
Okay.
No, it did not.
Let me did you test it for operability?
Yes, this revolver was loaded and fired as designed.
And as far as even, there wouldn't be any purpose for trying to compare the revolver to the 9mm spent casing, right?
No, once I make my identification, I stop. Once you recognize, say, a loved one at a party, you don't continue to look for them, is kind of my analogy on that.
And the same thing for the 40, you didn't see any need to try to figure out if that 9mm cartridge was fired from the 40 caliber firearm?
No, it's not designed to fire that, and I had already made my identification.
All right. And talking about, you fired all these guns, right?
Yes, I did,
And have you fired these calibers before?
many times.
And you fire a lot of guns in general?
Yes, compared to most folks, yes, many.
And in terms of recoil, or which ones are easier to shoot, which one has the least amount of recoil out of these three guns?
Thank you. Of these three, I was just going to say, of these three, definitely the Springfield Armory 9mm Luger.
Thank you.
Okay, let's take our afternoon break. We'll come back and go till 4.
Dispatch out?
Yes, ma'am.
calls? Okay. Is there one centralized number that
Yes.
the general public calls if they want to need a cab ride?
Yes, ma'am.
And generally, how many cabs are waiting a night?
It depends the nights. We have either 4 to 7 drivers in the Wasilla area, and 1 or 2 in Palmer.
And so how does each driver, how do you determine who's going to make a particular pickup?
We go by whoever, like when we roll on in at the beginning of our shift, there's no calls waiting. If I roll on first, I'll be the first one up, and so, and each individual driver that rolls on after, or they just get put in a lineup right at.
Okay. And is the Alaska Cab operate valley-wide, Palmer, Wasilla? Is there?
We operate here in the valley.
And I take it you're familiar with the valley and the valley roads?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you make pickups as far out as Alaska Cab will go?
To the west, as far out as Trapper Creek, and then going out to Glen, typically Sutton, and we also do pickups in Anchorage for those that are coming out here to the valley.
And so how does, when someone, you make a pickup, how do you determine how much the cab ride is gonna cost?
We run a meter.
And how does that meter work?
It runs off of mileage based off of the transmission.
And is that mileage and cost displayed in your vehicle?
Yes, ma'am.
Does the running cost display in the vehicle?
Yes.
So your passenger knows, if we stop at this point, I owe $10 or whatever.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to draw your attention to November 14th of 2016. Were you working as an Alaska Cab driver
Yes.
on that night? And were you working that night shift,
Yes.
6 p.m. to 6 a.m.?
Yes.
And did you receive a dispatch to the Little Susitna and Schrock Bridge?
Yes.
At the time that you received a dispatch, in particular this dispatch, do you have a contact number that's provided to you?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is the purpose of that?
It's for if, like, I'm going to your house. When I pull up in your driveway, or I may be looking for your driveway, I can contact you to get narrowed down either to a location or to let you know that I am there for you.
So you have a number you can call.
Yes, ma'am.
In this instance, when you received the dispatch to the widows who sit in Shock Bridge, did you have a return call phone number?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you recall what that phone number was?
It was 521-4273.
And just jumping forward a little bit, you were interviewed by Alaska State Troopers for this case,
Yes, ma'am.
and that was that more around the time of when the actual pickup occurred, back in November of 2016? Your interview.
It was, I want to say like around the 22nd of November is when I had the interview with the troopers.
And you provided Alaska State Troopers with that number as well.
Yes, ma'am.
And so back to the dispatch that you received, do you recall about what time that you were dispatched?
It was late in the evening. I'm not sure whether the exact time frame.
Before midnight, after midnight?
I believe it was before midnight.
And where were you at when you received the call?
I want to say I was sitting at Valley Performing Arts parking lot.
And so what route did you take up to the bridge there?
Up to the bridge, I would have taken the Parks to Church, and Church all the way up to the bridge.
And was it dark out when you made that ride?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you observe when you arrived at the location?
I observed 3 males that were on the left side of the road and the little pullout that's right there at the bridge.
And how old, do you know how old these males were?
I estimated their age to be late teens, early 20s.
What about ethnicity of the males, do you recall?
Not exactly.
White?
I believe they were all white.
How were they dressed? Do you remember?
Tennis shoes, blue jeans, like sweatshirts.
And this was November 14th of 2016. Do you remember what the weather temperature was out like that day, that night? Or that early morning, I should say.
Around that time, I want to say it was in the low 30s.
Did the 3 males appear to be dressed for the weather?
No,
Did they have coats, hats, gloves?
no.
When the 3 males, I take it they got in your cab.
Yes, ma'am.
Where did everybody sit?
They all sat in the back seat.
And what, do you have just a bench style back?
Yes, ma'am.
And how are they acting?
Like any of my normal affairs, they were talking amongst themselves.
Appear like anything was wrong at all?
No,
In distress?
no.
And when they got into to your cab, did you know where you were taking them at that point?
They told me that they wanted to go to a residence that was behind one of the, or near one of the charter schools here in Palmer.
And did they tell you how much money they had for the cab ride?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did they tell you?
They only had $43.
And what was gonna be the plan if the $43 didn't get them to the charter school?
area?
And they said to just drop them off wherever that $43 took them.
So start the meter and we'll see where we end up.
Yes, ma'am.
And so which route did you take then?
From the bridge, I went back down Church to the parks, and then over to the Palmer-Wasilla Highway, and down Palmer-Wasilla Highway.
So you're going back towards the Palmer area now?
Yes, ma'am.
And how far did the $43 get them?
It got them to Prospect.
And whereabouts is Prospect?
Prospect is just almost across the street, across the highway from Pioneer Pizza.
Did any of the three males have cell phones out, do you remember?
I don't remember cell phones. I do remember one of them had a tablet.
And what was that one doing with their tablet?
I don't know, ma'am. They had it out when they got in the car.
Okay. And when you say out, do you remember if it was on, off, or
I don't know.
was it lit up? Do you remember a light?
I don't remember it being lit up.
What about during the cab ride? Did anybody appear to be on a phone or playing on a tablet or anything?
I couldn't tell you. Part of their conversation was that they left their Wi-Fi hotspot on.
Okay. Anything else? Any other talk that you remember between them?
And they were talking about when they got to their destination, they were going to have to find an extension cord to plug in a heater or in a shed or a cabin or something that they were going to.
So when you end up at Prospect, how did you know to stop there?
Because one of them was watching the meter, and when it hit $43, they said, all right, and that's all that we have, you can let us out here.
Do you remember which one of them gave you the $43? And specifically, was the person with the tablet? Is that the
I don't know, ma'am.
Can you estimate how long the cab ride was from the bridge to Prospect?
It would have been about a 20-minute drive.
So after everybody gets out of the cab, do you observe where they go, what direction?
No, ma'am.
Do they go towards Palmer, towards Wasilla?
All I remember is they started walking toward Palmer.
And did they walk as a group? Did they split up?
They walked as a group.
In your 2 years as a cab driver, is it safe to say that you've picked up and given rides to people from local area bars,
Yes, ma'am.
intoxicated people?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you observe any signs of that any of these three males had been drinking or under the influence of anything?
No, ma'am.
Smell the odor of alcohol?
No, ma'am.
How about marijuana in the odor?
No.
I want to, if you could, I've labeled a couple tabs, a P, and I labeled a second tab a D, and I've labeled those for pickup and drop-off. We have Exhibit 12 that I believe has already been admitted. If you could come over to the map and just indicate where you picked the three males up and where you dropped them off.
Yes, ma'am.
We'll start with the pickup.
Sriracha and the little soup.
And the D for the drop-off.
Right here at the Palmer West Hill Highway and Prospect Road.
Okay, thank you. When you were contacted by the troopers sometime around November 23rd, 2016, did the trooper provide you with a photo lineup to see if you could potentially identify any of the three males?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you able to confidently identify any of the males?
No, ma'am.
Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, cross-examination?
I have no questions, thank you.
Okay, sir, you can step down. Okay, members of the jury, we are done for today. Again, I'll just caution you, the standard caution's still in play. Tomorrow we'll start at the same time, so be here at 8:30, and we'll go on record at 9.